The Ash and the Roots. Inheritance begins. Volume 1 of the Ash and the Roots trilogy. By Arthur Blackwood. Copyright 2025 Arthur Blackwood. All rights reserved. Prologue. The ash did not fall from the sky. It rose. Lucan stood at the edge of the river before dawn, when the city behind him was still quiet enough to pretend it had a memory. The water moved without sound, carrying silt and old light toward the sea. Somewhere upstream, bells marked the hour, blurred by distance and fog. He held the fragment in his palm. It was small, no larger than a coin, but heavy in the way certain things are heavy, not by weight but by consequence. Ash, fused with something older, root perhaps, or bone. He had stopped naming things years ago, when names had begun to cling too tightly. Footsteps approached on the stone behind him. Careful, deliberate. "You're early," the woman said. "So are you." She stopped beside him, resting her hands on the railing. The river caught her reflection in broken pieces. She wore dark wool and no mark of office, which told him more than any insignia could have. "Is it the same one?" she asked. Lucan closed his hand around the fragment. "There are no same ones anymore." They stood in silence as the city began to stir. Distant carts, a door opening, the first cough of a morning fire. London waking, unaware of how many choices had already been made in its name. "They're spreading," the woman said at last. "South. The islands first." Lucan nodded. Sicily had always been a threshold. Stone and fire layered too close together. Roots did not grow there by accident. And the others? Scattered, some hiding, some pretending they were never involved. And the child? She hesitated. Only for a moment. "She doesn't know," the woman said. "Not yet." Lucan finally turned. "She will—" "Yes." The fragment in his hand was warm now. Or perhaps it had always been. "This was never meant to be contained," he said. "You know that." "We tried," she replied. "That has to count for something." Lucan smiled without humor. "It never does." The river carried on, patient as erosion. Above them, the sky lightened, thin and gray. Another day beginning, another forgetting. "Roots don't ask permission," he said quietly. "They break stone. They crack walls. They remember." The woman watched the water. "And ash." "Ash," Lucan said, opening his hand at last, "remembers too, just differently." When she left, the city was fully awake. Lucan stayed where he was, until the fragment cooled and the choice he had been avoiding could no longer be delayed. Far from the river, far from London, something shifted, small, unnoticed, inevitable. The story had already begun. Chapter 1. A stranger made of ashes. The hairline crack shouldn't have been there. Elena Caruso held her breath, bracing her elbows on the padded rim of the conservation table as if stillness might coax the surface back into obedience. The terracotta panel, late medieval, likely Italian, of uncertain provenance and ruinous storage, had been drying under a controlled array of lamps for 3 days. She had followed every protocol, charted every temperature shift, measured the ambient humidity like a penitent counting prayers. And still, a faint line snaked through the central medallion, so thin it could have been a stray eyelash, or a warning. "Please don't do this," she murmured, as if the object could be embarrassed into compliance. Not today. Beyond the glass wall of the studio, the museum's after-hours quiet pressed in. London had settled into its midnight hush, the kind of hush that made stone breathe and old would tick. The conservation wing was all cool lights and tilting shadows, a cathedral of workbenches and articulated lamps, of brushes arranged like soldiers and tiny spatulas gleaming with surgical purpose. Somewhere, a dehumidifier hummed. Somewhere else, a clock made a sound like water tapping metal. Elena drew the lamps closer. The medallion's pigment, a patient web of ochres and umbers, looked unassuming until you caught the undersheen. There, bare like a pulse beneath skin, lay a varnish that refused to die. It was not original. Someone had layered on in the last century, crude and glossy, perhaps to disguise damage. She had tested the solvent mixtures on the sacrificial corners and found the correct ratio, that delicate alchemy between dissolution and restraint. The varnish had gone soft under her cotton swabs, melting like sugar, and then the line had appeared. She reached for the 10x loop and lowered it to her eye. Up close, the crack wasn't random at all. It curved with intention, arcing to meet the edge of the medallion, where 3 fine spirals seemed to chase one another, a triskelion, stylized, more suggestion than symbol. She hadn't noticed it so cleanly before. The old varnish had muddied everything. Now it felt as though the panel was waking up under her hands. Elena glanced at her notes. Terracotta devotional panel. Donor. Estate transfer from private collection, Sicily. Pigment and binder consistent with 14th to 15C. Workshop practices. The question mark had bothered her since the accession meeting. Sicily. The word didn't simply describe geography. It stirred home-scented weather inside her, summer air and citrus peel, almond blossom dusting the shoulders of her grandmother's black dress. "You aren't from Palermo," her supervisor, Allison, had told her earlier that week, leaning with the grace of a long habit against the studio doorway. "You're from London with grandparents from Palermo. There's a difference." "Only on maps," Elena had replied, and Allison had smiled that thin smile of tired allies before reminding her about the gala in 2 days and a line of trustees who wanted easy miracles out of difficult objects. Elena set the loop down. The crack caught the light again, faint, almost vanishing. She ran a gloved fingertip, not touching, never touching, parallel to it, as if tracing on air. Something about the geometry felt familiar, not analytically familiar, bodily familiar, the way you know a song from 3 notes or the shape of a door handle in the dark. "Okay," she said softly. "Where do you want me to look?" She rotated the panel's mount, careful, breath measured. The medallion's border presented, in shallow relief, a procession of almond blossoms. 5 petals each, notched just so, interleaved with small triangular cuts that might have been symbolic or purely decorative. 2 petals near the top had been repainted. Clumsy work. She'd already noted the retouch on her worksheet. It wasn't the blossoms. Then it was the space between them. The negative field carried a faint, repeated mark, like the ghost of the seal press and lifted. Never full, never legible. If you didn't know to look, you'd miss it. But now she knew. The studio's air shifted, the way air does when someone opened the faraway door. Elena waited. Nothing. Her phone lay face down on the bench, its locked screen a scatter of messages from her mother, and a calendar chime she let pass. Family dinner Sunday? Don't hide in the museum. Tesoro. She wasn't hiding, not exactly. She just needed to be the person this panel required, the version of herself most at ease among cracked varnish and stubborn pasts. The solvent jar trembled when she set it down, a tiny ring of ripples shivering across the surface. She told herself it was her hand, losing patience, wanting sleep. Then the lamps hummed a shade lower, as if the building had inhaled. Elena straightened. Beyond the glass, the corridor was empty. The fire door remained closed. She knew the security routines. The night guard made his rounds at 20 past and 50 past the hour. It was 10 past. She bent again to the panel. The line had deepened by a hair. No, not deepened. Sharpened, the way contrast sharpens when a storm comes. She had never believed objects carried intention. Memory, yes, the empirical kind, trapped in materials, but not intention, not a will. And yet she found herself lowering her voice instinctively, as though speaking near a restless infant. "You're all right," she said to the terracotta. "I promise. We're all right." The cotton swab went damp. She rolled it gently over the edge of the varnish, counting out the passes, 1, 2, 3, then blotting meticulously, then pausing to watch the surface settle. The softened varnish gave up its gloss in tiny translucent curls. Beneath, the pigment breathed. The triskelion motif was clearer now, nested within a medallion, like a compass disguised as ornament. A knock startled her. 2 taps, not at the door, on glass. Elena looked up, heart doing something unhelpful in her throat. No one stood beyond the studio window. The corridor remained a blank ribbon of sheen and shadow. Light glared faintly off the glass, reflecting her, dark hair twisted into a careless knot, face drawn tight with concentration, her grandmother's gold ring on a chain against her throat. The taps had been small, perhaps the radiator pinging or the cooling of the lamps. She exhaled, not quite convinced. "Get a grip," she told herself, and half laughed at how badly the words fit in her mouth. When she glanced down, the crack had finished its arc. It completed the circle with the triskelion, joining the outer rim at a point that corresponded, if you charted the medallion as a clock, to 3 o'clock. 3 o'clock. She scribbled a note before the thought could evaporate. A pattern implies a system implies a design, and a design implies a designer. Elena eased the panel's mount again and adjusted the angle of the lamp. In the harshly raking light, tiny raised ridges emerged, almost invisible otherwise, defining an inscription in the negative space around the blossoms. She caught her breath. The letters weren't Latin nor modern script, but they weren't entirely unfamiliar either. Her grandfather's attic had been full of oddities: faded prayer cards, talismans, a shard of ceramic tile with symbols inked onto glazed back. As a child, she'd traced them with a greasy finger, while Nana made almond biscotti and told her saints walked faster on days it threatened rain. She took a photograph with the studio camera, then a second at a different angle, light, unkind, and frontal, then a third with the polarizing filter. The inscription resisted neat capture, as if it preferred to exist in the corner of the eye. She knew better than to force it. Catalog later. For now, steady hands, control breath, and a discipline that separated craftspeople from romantics. Her stomach reminded her it was the hour of vengeful hunger. Elena ignored it. She swapped swabs, checked the solvent, and worked another quadrant. Down the corridor, the elevator chimed, doors sliding open and shut without disgorging anyone. The sound stitched a seam of cold along her arms. The crack shifted again. No, not the crack. The panel. It tilted a fraction in its cradle, a movement too small to be visible and too insistent to be imagined. The rubberized brackets held. Nothing toppled, and yet Elena felt like a whispered word against her ear. A nudge. "Look, all right," she whispered. She leaned in with the loop once more, bringing the world down to pigment and air. The inscription's shallow ridges made sense now, not as language, but as map. 3 o'clock, a glyph like a thorn leaf. 6 o'clock, 2 short strokes like wings tucked in. 9, a seed shape. 12, a break, deliberate, as if waiting for a piece that had never been fitted. At the very center of the medallion, half hidden beneath freshly lifted varnish, the clay bore an embedded mark, no bigger than a fingernail. It might have been an impression of a tool or a maker's stamp. But strangely, the edges were too clean, too fine for a medieval implement. It looked newer, not crudely modern, precisely modern, the way good forgeries learn from the past and then forget to be clumsy. "Who carved you?" Elena asked, not expecting an answer. Someone shifted on the far side of the glass. This time she did not pretend it was pipes or settling wood. A shadow, tall and distinct enough to have shape, had moved from the elevator lobby toward the corridor bend, where the emergency light makes a daguerreotype of the world. The night guard was shorter, and he wore squeaky shoes. This figure made no sound. It came to the intersection, paused, and was gone. Not vanished, stepped out of sight, toward the emergency exit, but that would have triggered alarms. Elena's heart stumbled over itself. "Security," she said aloud, as much to hear a human word as to test it in the air. She reached for her phone, thumb hovering over Allison's name. Then the front desk. She felt ridiculous. You are alone in a museum with something that wants your attention. She had wanted attention her whole childhood and learned to earn it exactly like this, by being useful to the nearest mystery. "Hi, it's Elena in conservation," she rehearsed softly. "Can you?" The lights dimmed, just enough to erase the superficial glare from the glass and darken the corners of the room. It was not a power cut. The lamps held steady. The overheads simply breathed low. For an absurd second, she had the thought that the building had chosen mood lighting. She didn't call. She lowered the phone and straightened her shoulders the way Nana had taught her. Back long, chin soft, a posture that offered dignity to whatever approached. The studio door handle turned. Elena froze. The lock should have been engaged. She always turned it at night out of habit. She remembered doing it, thumbing the metal, feeling the click. The handle stopped, rested, then returned to neutral with a forgiving sigh, like a teacher deciding to wait. A ridiculous fear darted across her mind. They would take the panel. Who they were, she could not have said. Thieves didn't knock. But she knew, with a certainty that had nothing to do with logic, that whatever had followed the corridor wanted the terracotta, or what it contained. The medallion's triskelion watched her with its placid geometry. Elena lifted the panel's dust cover, an innocuous sheet of unbleached cotton, and draped it back over the object a little clumsily, not to hide it exactly, but to change the room's story. People miss things under covers, even hungry things. When she breathed again, the air tasted like ash, not burning burnt, a memory of fire carried in cloth. She closed her eyes a moment and saw her grandparents' courtyard in late March, almond trees foaming white and pink under a Sicilian sun. Spring there always smelled both of sweetness and smoke, as if the land couldn't forgive itself for all it had survived. She opened her eyes to the cotton cover. A single petal lay on top of it. A petal. Elena stared until the shape stopped being a misunderstanding of light. There was a real almond blossom petal, paper-thin and veined, gently cupped as if fresh. She reached for it with tweezers, moved as gently as if the air were made of soap. The petal didn't crumble. It made the faintest whisper as it lifted, the sound of a secret, knowing it was about to be told. She placed it in a specimen dish. Her hands had forgotten how to be steady. "Okay," she said, and her voice sounded like someone else's. "Okay." Something brushed the glass again, a whisper of presence that did not make a sound. The corridor remained empty. Elena's reflection, translucent, held impossible eye contact with itself. She turned back to the panel, slid the cotton cover aside just enough to see the medallion's heart. The central stamp, too clean, too precise, had changed. It was not possible. She knew it. She believed in test results and microscope images, and the anchoring decency of repeatable facts. But the mark in the center, the fingernail-sized sign she had catalogued a moment ago, now glimmered with a residue of something like heat, like a breath held too long and then let go. The shape was clearer, edges no longer pretending to be ancient. 3 curved blades, spiraling out from a point, delicate as a trinity of leaves. The triskelion again, this time unmistakable. Her grandmother's ring warmed against her skin, an inexplicable flush through the thin chain. A voice, no louder than thought, moved through the room. Not words. A sense. A direction. 3. Her eyes flicked to the medallion's 3 o'clock position, the place where the crack had sealed its arc. Within the shallow ridge of the inscription, a speck of something darker lay lodged. A grain of stone? A soot crumb? No, too regular. Too placed. Elena reached for the micro spatula, slid its edge so lightly into the groove that the instrument felt like a rumor of metal. The speck dislodged into the catch cup with a soundlessly weighted drop. She magnified it under the auxiliary scope. A seed, not botanical. A bead? No. A fragment of glass? It looked instead like a scale. Translucent, milky, organic, no animal she could name. She thought of wings and hated herself for it. The handle turned again. This time, quietly it yielded. The studio door opened the width of a palm and stopped, as though whoever stood there had no interest in pretending they were not there. The corridor's cold bled in. Elena didn't move. A figure occupied the doorway, a silhouette against the pale hall. Tall, angular, still, less a person in a composed absence of noise. She could make out the ragged suggestion of a coat or something like a coat, something that remembered being cloth, but had since learned other ways to be. She thought he for no reason she could defend, did not step inside. Elena, the figure said, and the sound was a harbor. Consonants moored where they belonged, vowels shaped with low London cadence that had slept somewhere older. She didn't ask how he knew her name. She had the sense that as she acknowledged that particular breach, other boundaries would overflow too. Instead, she found herself doing what she always did with people who frightened her. She asked a technical question. How long? She said, managing steadiness. Have you been watching that panel? The figure was quiet. The pause wasn't defensive. It was courteous. When the answer came, it carried the distinctness of a vow. A very long time. He stepped inside, and the scent of ashes, impossible and familiar, came with him like a coat against weather. His face was all shadow and suggestion until the studio lamps found the planes of it. Dark hair, an old mistake mended in the line of his jaw, eyes the color of sleep before arrives. You can't have it, Elena said, and heard the foolishness of the sentence even as she chose it. It's an accession. He inclined his head, something like sorrow passing and leaving no mark. I'm not here to take it, he said. I am here because it woke, and because you woke it. The room seemed to shrink without losing any space. Elena's grandmother's ring went warm again, a furnace wrapped in metal. She steadied her hands against the bench. And you are? She asked, as if names made things manageable. The pause was again a courtesy, and then a decision closing like a book. Lucan, he said, and the syllables seemed to have known her before she heard them. Once a guardian. Now, what guardians become when they are no longer permitted to be what they are? The medallion waited between them, quiet as a mouth that knows another sentence is coming. Lucan did not move closer. He stood just inside the threshold, one hand resting lightly against the studio door, as if the pressure alone kept the hinges from choosing otherwise. The way he held space was wrong for a thief, too careful for an intruder. Thieves took, intruders violated. This figure seemed instead to wait, patient, unhurried, a man who had carried waiting as a vocation. Elena forced herself to look at him steadily. You can't just walk into a conservation lab at midnight. There are cameras, security. There are, Lucan said, his voice low, shaped by a cadence not native to modern London. But not for me. It wasn't arrogance in the words, more like a statement whether the rain falls, the sea recedes, cameras do not see me. He stepped further into the lamplight, and the air between them gathered a weight she felt in her ribs. He wore a coat the color of charcoal, long enough to blur the memory of wings. The thought came unbidden, absurd, and yet she couldn't push it away. You know my name, she said. Why? I knew it before you were born. His gaze flicked toward the panel, draped in cotton, then back to her. Your family was marked by this work a long time ago. You carried the residue without knowing it. Elena felt the old defensiveness rise, an instinct honed by years of professors and supervisors explaining her heritage to her, as if Sicily were a curiosity she needed annotated. But Lucan's words weren't academic. They were intimate, quiet, delivered like confession from someone who had already grieved what he was revealing. I restore objects, she said, more sharply than she meant. I don't carry marks. Lucan's eyes, dark, impossibly steady, rested on her grandmother's ring where it gleamed faintly against her throat. Then explain why that gold burns when the seal stirs. Her hand flew to the chain instinctively, fingers closing around the ring. It was warm, hotter than it should be, as if her skin had become an ember. She wanted to rip it off, fling away, but her grandmother's voice returned, where it always, tesoro. It listens when you cannot. Who are you really? She asked. The faintest curve touched his mouth. Not a smile, a memory of one. Once I was a guardian, a keeper between doors. I swore oaths that bound me to light and silence. But oaths break or are broken. Now I am only what is left. Elena wanted to laugh at the theatricality of it, but her body refused to cooperate. The air tasted of scorched almonds bittersweet, the scent of her childhood summers in Palermo when fields burned to make way for new planting. Nothing in London smelled like that. Nothing should. You think I'm going to believe this, she said, that some ex-guardian has been lurking around an accession panel from Sicily, waiting for a conservator with a family ring? You don't have to believe me. His voice softened, but you felt it. The panel shifted. The inscription breathed. That is not science, Elena. That is inheritance. He spoke her name again, and this time it carried weight, like the sound of her mother calling from the kitchen when she was a child, or her grandfather reciting prayers against storms. Not commanding, not pleading, inviting her into a room. she did not remember building. She took a step back toward the workbench, angling herself where she could reach the emergency alarm switch with a single motion. If you're dangerous, You already know I'm dangerous. Lucan's tone was without vanity. The question is whether that danger points toward you or away from you. The cotton cover on the panel shifted. Just a breath, as if stirred by air that had not moved. Both of them turned. Beneath the fabric, faint light seeped through, phosphorescent, slow. The way coals glow after midnight. The blossom motif beneath it trembled, as if a hand unseen had traced its curve. Elena whispered before she could stop herself. "It's alive." "No," Lucan said. "It is awake." The petals she had trapped in the specimen dish quivered against the glass. For a heartbeat, she thought it might split open, spill pollen or light. Instead, it stilled again, waiting. Elena felt her knees weaken. She gripped the bench hard enough to hurt. "What do you want from me?" Lucan finally moved, crossing half the distance between them with a step that felt less like walking and more like arrival, to keep you breathing, to keep it from opening before you are ready. Ready for what? He studied her as though deciding whether the answer would wound or fortify. His silence was heavier than speech. Then, finally, for the choice your blood has been postponing for centuries. The studio phone rang. Both of them startled, though Lucan less visibly. The shrill sound shattered the room's fragile suspension, echoing against glass and tile. Elena jumped for it, grateful for the anchor of something ordinary, something explainable. She lifted the receiver. Conservation Lab, Elena Caruso. Static, not the fuzzy kind of bad line, but deep static like wind tearing through stone. And beneath it, a voice, female, whispering, layered as if several mouths spoke in tandem. "Do not trust what has already fallen." The line clicked dead. Elena lowered the phone, her hand trembling. That was... She turned. Lucan had vanished. The studio door was closed, bolted as if it had never opened. Only the faint trace of ash on the floor remained, curling in patterns that looked eerily like wings. Chapter 2. Shadows beside the river. The phone's silence rang louder than its call had. Elena set the receiver down with exaggerated care, as if mishandling it might summon the voice again. She stood still in the lamplight, breath shallow, waiting for the ordinary world to reassert itself, for the hum of the dehumidifier to sound like a machine again instead of an omen, for the cotton-covered panel to behave like terracotta instead of a heart. Nothing complied. The faint dusting of ash on the tiles remained. Tracing lines her mind couldn't help but read as deliberate. She knelt to spite herself, tugging a clean swab from its packet, brushing the powder into a specimen vial. It smelled faintly of scorched almond wood. Her hand shook hard enough to rattle the vial's cap before she tightened it. Lucan was gone. The corridor was empty. She could almost believe she had hallucinated him. Except for the ash, except for the petal, except for the warmth burning steady at her throat. The ring! She touched it, and it pulsed like a vein beneath her skin. Her grandmother's voice returned unbidden, phrases repeated over childhood like nursery rhymes. This ring listens. It listens when you cannot. Wear it, even if you don't understand. Especially if you don't. Elena had dismissed those words as superstition, the kind Nana liked to lace into her cooking. Salt over the shoulder. Water boiled 3 times for soup. Saints invoke for rain. But the metal against her skin was no longer metaphor. It listened, and now it answered. She wrapped her arms around herself and forced the lab back into order. Tools capped, solvent jars sealed, swabs disposed. If she could box the mess into routines, maybe her thoughts would follow. Yet the cotton cover betrayed her. A faint glow still pulsed beneath it, irregular, like a creature trying to match a heartbeat. She switched off the lamps, hoping darkness would smother the shimmer. It didn't. Elena locked the studio door, double-checked it this time, then pressed her forehead to the cool glass pane. The corridor stretched silent, fluorescent lights buzzing faintly, the polished floor reflecting no one but her. The elevator stood shut. She almost expected it to sigh open, to disgorge shadows. When it didn't, relief left her trembling harder. She needed out. Fresh air, noise, anything human. She gathered her coat, tucked the specimen vial into her pocket, and made her way to the staff exit. The guard barely looked up from his phone as he waved her past. She wanted to ask if he'd seen a tall man, dark-haired, coat like ash. She didn't. She couldn't bear the blank answer. The streets of London after midnight had their own tide. Cabs sliding by, students spilling laughter, the odd delivery van growling awake. Elena walked fast, hands deep in her pockets, the ring's warmth burning steady. She reached the river instinctively, drawn to the cool open space, to the familiar ribbon of water moving without secrets. The Thames gleamed under lamplight, black and silver, a restless mirror. She stopped at the railing, exhaling hard enough to fog the air. Her chest ached with the need to normalize what refused normalcy. She pulled the specimen vial free. The ashen side shifted when she tilted it, patterns forming and collapsing like language struggling to be written. She snapped it back upright, heart hammering. "Get a grip," she muttered. "It's dust." Nothing more. A figure detached from the shadows under the bridge. For one panic second she thought it was Lucan again, returned like a bad refrain. But the stride was different, lighter, brisk, purposeful. A man in a dark jacket. Collar up against the cold, moving with the calm of someone who had rehearsed blending in. He slowed as he drew level with her, eyes flicking to the vial in her hand. Too sharp a glance, too knowing. "Late night for samples," he said, accent clipped. "English but not London." He smiled, friendly enough to pass for harmless, but his eyes didn't smile at all. "Museum work?" Elena shoved the vial back into her pocket, every nerve sharpening. "Excuse me." "Conservation lab," he said smoothly. "You've been working late. On something unusual." Her throat dried. "Who are you?" "Concerned," he said, leaning against a railing a respectful distance away. The sort of man who notices when certain doors begin to shift. He paused, studying her face. "You should be careful who you let walk into your studio. Miss Caruso." Her blood chilled. He knew her name. Again, always her name. "If you've been watching me..." "Not watching. Listening. There are others who listen too, and they're less sympathetic." He tilted his head toward the river. "Do you know what happens when something ancient decides it has slept long enough? It pulls everyone near into its dream. Some drown. Some wake changed. Few walk away." She wanted to run, but her legs had rooted. "And you? Which are you?" The man's smile thinned. "I'm the reminder that not every shadow is on your side." A passing cab broke the moment, headlights washing the railing. When she blinked against the glare, the man was gone. Not walked away, gone. The space where he had leaned was empty, cold air filling the shape. Elena's hand clenched around the vial in her pocket. The ash burned faintly through the glass. She backed from the railing, scanning the street, desperate for the mundane sight of people, any people. A group of students spilled from a pub, arguing about kebabs. She almost wept at the sound of their laughter. She turned for home. Her flat was small, second floor in a converted Victorian near Camden. Books stacked high, a plant she always forgot to water, windows that rattled in wind. Safe, ordinary. She locked the door behind her and leaned against it, waiting for her pulse to steady. The ring's heat dimmed at last, settling into a residual warmth like a banked ember. She set the vial on her desk, unwilling to let it leave her sight. Sleep was out of the question. She sat at the desk, laptop open, notes scattered. She tried to catalog the night's events the way she would restoration. Materials, methods, anomalies. But every line turned into questions. Who was Lucan? Who was the man on the river? Why did her grandmother's ring know more than she did? And what did the panel want? She pulled the chain over her head and laid the ring flat on the desk. Its surface caught the lamplight, plain and gold, unremarkable. But when she touched it, images bled into her mind uninvited. Almond trees in bloom under a Sicilian sky, fire curling through dry fields, a triskelion cut into stone, and always a voice whispering at the edge of hearing. 3. She snapped her eyes open. The desk lamp flickered. For a heartbeat, she swore the ring's shadow formed not a circle but 3 blades, spiraling. She slammed the laptop shut. Enough. Tomorrow she would go back to the museum, demand explanations, maybe run tests on the ring itself. Something quantifiable. Something that restored the balance. Tonight she would lock the ash in a drawer, with the ring again, and pray for ordinary dreams. She dropped the ring back over her neck, and as she finally lay on her bed, staring at the ceiling, she knew two things with clarity that burned. One, nothing about her life would be ordinary again. Two, someone, whether Lucan or the man by the river, or something older still, was already waiting for her to choose. Morning did not erase the night. Elena woke to a gray London sky pressing against her window, the kind of heavy light that made the whole city seem submerged. She had barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, the petal hovered there, white and veined, falling endlessly onto the cotton cover. Every time she drifted near sleep, the phone rang again in her mind, spilling static and voices braided together. She dragged herself upright, dressed in the least wrinkled clothes she could find, and forced coffee into her veins. The ring still burned faintly, as if it had refused to rest. She touched it, half expecting the warmth to scald. It didn't. It lingered instead, like a quiet pulse under her skin. At the museum, the day's rhythms had already begun. Staff unlocking storage bays, docents gossiping in hushed voices, a courier wheeling crates across the marble floor. Elena walked faster, as though haste could fold the night into the distance. Inside the conservation lab, the panel waited under its cotton shroud. For a breath, she considered pretending it wasn't there, starting another project, something mundane and harmless, like repairing a cracked ceramic jug. But her gaze kept dragging back to the covered shape. She uncovered it. The medallion looked ordinary again, pigment muted, surface inert. No glow, no tremor. For one dangerous heartbeat, she almost believed she had imagined everything. Then she noticed the edge of the crack. It had sealed. Perfectly. As if it had never been. Her stomach dropped. Conservation science did not repair cracks overnight. They widened. They collapsed. They did not vanish. Elena? She jumped. Allison, her supervisor, stood at the doorway, arms folded, eyes rimmed with exhaustion. You're in early. I couldn't sleep. Neither could the trustees. Allison stepped in, peering at the panel. You've done wonders. That varnish was choking it. Whatever you did last night, keep doing it. The gala donors will worship you. Elena forced a smile. She couldn't explain that the panel had healed itself. She couldn't explain ash on the floor or petals from nowhere. She scribbled notes instead, hands trembling enough that the pen left uneven strokes. Allison tilted her head. You look pale. Everything all right? Fine, Elena lied. Just late night. Allison hesitated. Then let it go. There's a courier from Palermo here. Wants to see you. Claims he has paperwork about Providence. I told him it's probably misplaced in the system, but he insisted. Elena's breath snagged. Palermo. Providence. A courier who knew to ask for her. Where is he? She asked. By the river entrance. He's got that look of man who thinks couriers deserve marble halls. Elena wiped her hands and left the lab, forcing her stride steady. She followed the hall to the side entrance that opened toward the embankment. The river light bled through tall glass panes, making silhouettes of everyone who passed. A man waited near the doors, tall, shoulders sharp against his jacket. He turned as she approached. Not Lucan, not the man from the night before. Someone else. His hair was pale, his smile precise, his eyes far too cold for a courier. Miss Caruso? He asked smoothly, accent touched faintly by the Mediterranean. I've come from Palermo. May we speak? Elena kept distance between them. Your name? He reached into his jacket, produced an envelope with the museum's crest stamped on it. The paper looked authentic. Too authentic. Call me Matteo, he said. I represent parties interested in ensuring the panel's safe return to where it belongs. Elena's stomach tightened. The panel is accession property of this museum. Nothing leaves without trustees' approval. Matteo's smile did not reach his eyes. Approval is a flexible word, Signorina. I think you know that already. Objects like this do not truly belong to institutions. They belong to the bloodlines they were meant to find. Her ring burned hotter, as though it recognized his words. She stepped back, heart hammering. Who sent you? Mateo's gaze lingered on the chain at her throat. For the briefest second, something in his expression cracked, like recognition or hunger. Then it smoothed. You already know, he said softly. A shadow shifted at the far end of the hall. Lucan stood there, half in light, half in absence, as if the corridor itself had shaped him. His eyes fixed on Mateo with a violence that required no weapon. Mateo stiffened, inclining his head in mocking acknowledgement. Guardian, he said, almost spitting the word. Still skulking corridors, I see. Lucan's voice was calm, but edged like glass. You should not be here. Mateo smiled thinly. And yet here I am. He turned to Elena, lowering his voice so only she could hear. Be careful whom you trust, Miss Caruso. Fallen guardians fall for a reason. Before she could answer, he slipped through the doors and into the river light, vanishing into the crowd. Lucan crossed the hall toward her. His presence bent the space around him, quieting the air, commanding the eye. Don't listen to him, he said. Elena's knees wanted to give way. She braced herself on the glass. Who is he? Lucan's expression darkened. A herald of the ones who have been waiting. He carries their scent. He will not stop until you are unmade or remade in their image. Elena pressed her fist to her throat where the ring burned. And you? Why should I trust you? Lucan's gaze softened, but only slightly. Because the night you stop trusting me will be the night you stop breathing. Elena did not ask Lucan to follow her back to the conservation lab. He did anyway, at a quiet distance, drawing no eyes of the corridor carried docents and a pair of trustees discussing canapes. The museum had a way of teaching people to ignore what they couldn't catalog. A man shaped like absence moved through it with perfect camouflage. Inside the lab, Elena shut the door with more force than necessary and turned the bolt. She lifted the cotton cover. The panel lay as she had left it, ordinary as a lie. The sealed crack gleamed faintly in raking light, a healed scar refusing to be quite matte. Who is we? She asked without looking at Lucan. Mateo said we. Parties interested. Who are they? Lucan stood on the far side of the table, hands open to show he carried nothing. Old names under new coats. In Palermo, they're called Custodians. In London, donors. They prefer traders when it suits them, and priests when it sells better. He tilted his head toward the medallion. They believe what sleeps here belongs to them by inheritance, or conquest. The words taste the same to them. Custodians. Elena breathed a word, as if it might leave a mark on the glass. And the ring? You keep staring at it, as if you can hear it thinking. I can, Lucan said simply. Silence settled. She reached for a swab to have something that wasn't an answer in her hands. Allison mentioned a courier from Palermo with Providence paperwork. He was too perfect. The envelope, the crest, if it's a forgery. It isn't, Lucan said. It's genuine. Stolen. Then laundered back to the donors who own the crest on the envelope. The game has many tables. Elena stared at him. You expect me to accept that as casually as discussing glue weights. I expect nothing. He nodded at the panel. But I suggest we stop letting the other side set the appointment. We. The word cut sharper than she intended. You burst into my lab, you speak in riddles, you vanish like smoke, and now you're we? Something like hurt moved behind his stillness, then stilled. I will stop saying we if you prefer. It doesn't change the fact that the mark on that panel answers to your ring, and that the men behind Mateo will try to separate you from both. Elena closed her eyes, counted to 3 because the number felt wired into her bones. When she opened them, she said, brisk and professional, Then teach me what you think I need to know. Quickly. For a start, Lucan said, this was never only a devotional. It is a seal, 1 of 3, that closes a door that should not open. The triskelion is not a flourish. It is a map to the 3 points where the seal was anchored. One has loosened. His gaze flicked to the heel crack, and then tried to pretend otherwise. Where are the other 2? She asked. 1 under rock, 1 under water, he said. all within reach of people who have learned to call theft stewardship. Her laugh sounded brittle. Under rock and underwater. Useful. His mouth kinked with shadow of humor. You ask quickly. She moved closer to the panel, leaning into the medallion center. Up close, the too-clean stamp looked almost human, as if a precise hand had pressed something living into clay. How old is the seal? Older than the panel, Lucan said. The clay is medieval. The work hidden in it is not. So someone inserted a modern seal into a medieval object. Elena swallowed. That's vandalism. Sometimes vandalism is the only protection left of powerless, Lucan said. The ones who did it were running out of time and authority. They buried what they could where reverence would guard it. Her skin prickled. My grandparents were not custodians in the sense the others use the word, Lucan finished softly. But they were marked by the promise to keep shut what wanted to open. They did not tell you, because the first rule of carrying fire is not to talk about sparks. Elena pressed her palm flat against the table to stop the tremor in her fingers. Matteo said objects belonged to bloodlines they were meant to find. That sounded like a threat pretending to be heritage. It is both, Lucan said, and a test. They want to know if you will answer the ring or the crest on the envelope. A sharp knock snapped both their heads toward the door. Elena, Allison's voice, then the handle turned. Bolt held. Everything okay? Facilities need to get in later and check the ventilation. Also, there's a donor who'd love a peek if you're comfortable. Give me 15 minutes. Elena called, aiming for casual. I'm in the middle of a solvent test. Of course. A pause. You sure you're all right? Yes, Elena lied. See you in a bit. Footsteps receded. She turned back to Lucan. I can't keep people out forever. If the panel is a seal, what happens if a donor sticks a finger in the wrong place? The same thing that happens when a child picks at a scab and says, look, it's healed, Lucan said. It bleeds. Then we need proof. She reached for the studio camera. Images of the inscription at multiple angles. Spectral passes if I can requisition the kit. And I need to see what the ring does when it's not around my neck. She slipped the chain free and laid the ring gently on a clean glass slide. Lucan watched without moving. The metal looked like any ring, plain band, worn smooth by other lives. Elena flicked the desk lamp to a harsh angle, raking light across the medallion, then the ring. Nothing, she said after a moment, both relieved and disappointed. Ask, then. Lucan said, for what? Elena glanced at him. For permission, he said softly. It listens when you cannot. Your grandmother said, listening is not obeying. Ask. Elena exhaled, feeling foolish, and bent over the ring. If you have anything to show me, she murmured. This is the part where you make me less crazy. For a second, nothing. Then the ring warmed against the glass. The heat not in degrees, but in intention, like a hand placed over hers long ago. A thin sheen, condensation, breath, bloomed inside the slide, and when it cleared, something delicate lay traced in vapor. 3 sigils, equidistant on an invisible circle. At each point, a different mark. A thorn leaf, a pair of wings folded inward, a seed. Elena's throat tightened. 3, she whispered. Their positions used correspond to places mirrored in the world. Lucan said. The leaf was orchards, groves, living boundaries. The wings marked a high place where the air thins. The seed keeps moving by design. Orchards. Elena's mind leapt without permission to her grandparents' courtyard, almond trees heavy with blossom. In Sicily. In many places, Lucan said. But yes. She snapped photographs, wide, then close, changing exposure, locking proof into pixels. The sigils faded as quickly as breath on glass. She slid the ring back onto the chain with fingers that refused steadiness. All right, she said. Under rock. Under water. Orchard. Height. Moving seed. She flipped her notebook open, words sprinting to keep pace with thought. If one anchor is here in London, what else lines up? What in this city pretends to be older than it is and sits near water? The city itself, Lucan said dryly. Thank you, she muttered, narrowing it down. The anchor here is not the river, he added. It is the idea of a crossing, a boundary that taught itself to be a bridge. London Bridge. She almost laughed at her own cliché. Not the bridge, Lucan said. What remembers it? He looked toward the wall, as if he could see through plaster, out to the city's palimpsest. Places that were other things once. Churches that wore older names. Gates that forgot they were gates. Elena thought of St. Magnus the Martyr, of ruined churches she'd walked past on her way to the river, their stones older than their faces. I can't close anything today, she said. I have a full lab schedule, a supervisor, and trustees with canopy opinions. You're not closing anything today, Lucan said. You're learning to stand near it without being taken. The phone on the wall rang again. Elena froze. Lucan did not. He crossed the room in one motion and lifted the receiver before she could move. Not hers, he said into the mouthpiece, voice edged like frost. You don't get to braid yourself into her hearing. Static answered, and then the layered whisper Elena had heard last night. Not words. A shape that felt like drowning while standing in air. Lucan listened, face unreadable. Then come above ground, he said at last, and hung up with a gentleness that felt like a threat. Elena swallowed. What did it say? That what woke will not sleep again until it eats, he said, and that the first bite is always offered, never taken. She stared. Meaning they will ask you to hand it to them. Nicely, paper stamped, crest embossed. A muted knock sounded. The bolt shivered under pressure. Facilities, a man called through the door. Ventilation inspection? We've got you on the list. Elena traded a glance with Lucan. He nodded once, then stepped to the far wall where the cabinets threw a soft shadow. By the time she slid the bolt, he was gone again, the shadow merely shadow. Two men in navy overalls stood outside, one with a toolbox, the other with a clipboard. The first looked bored. The second did not. His gaze slid past Elena toward the panel with a hunger he poorly concealed, then flicked to the chain at her throat with something that wasn't hunger at all. Quick check, miss, the clipboard man said, smile civil. We'll be out of your hair in a tick. Elena stood aside because saying no would make more noise than she could afford. The bored one climbed a stepladder at the vent and began unscrewing the grill. The clipboard man took a long route around the lab, not quite circling the table, hands in pockets as if to prove his innocence. He paused by the panel, leaned in, sniffed almost imperceptibly. Elbow grease, he said cheerfully. Smells like almonds. Elena's skin went cold. Done. The board man called, replacing the grill. Airflow's fine. Filter swap next month. They left in a rush of professional efficiency. Elena locked the door behind them and sagged against it, heart finally admitting what her mind had been cataloging. She was already inside someone else's protocol. Lucan's voice came from the shadow by the cabinets. They'll keep coming like that. 11 harmless visits, then one with a pocket the right size for what they want. I can't shut the lab, she said. I can't protect this alone. You aren't alone, he said quietly. The way he said it. No flourish, no rhetoric, slid under her defenses. She looked at him and saw not only the stranger made of ashes, but the shape of a decision she had been postponing, because decisions make futures real. Then say it plain, she said. What do you need me to do today? 2 things. He stepped closer, careful, as if approaching a skittish animal. First, write a province report that says nothing a thief can use, names that cannot be traded, dates that cannot be leveraged, phrases that look complete and reveal nothing. You are good at this. Make it so convincing they stop improvising and start relying on it. And second, walk, he said. At noon, when the museum is loudest, leave by the side door, take no obvious route, and meet me by the ruin with the hollow steeple and the trees growing where pews used to be. St. Dunstan in the east, she said before she could stop herself. She had gone there on lonely lunches, to sit on a stone and let green swallow noise. Lucan's eyes warmed, not with victory but with recognition. Yes. And then, she asked, then I show you what under rock looks like in a city that forgot its caves. Elena glanced at the clock. 10:42. She had a donor peak at 11 and a trustee walkthrough at 11:30. Noon would be the only chaos wide enough to hide in. She wiped her hands on a clean cloth. She did not need. If I'm fired for this. You'll be alive for it, Lucan said. She almost smiled. You have a gift for reassurance. I have a gift for accuracy, he said. Reassurance is a bonus when we earn it. She pulled a fresh worksheet and began writing, letting her training take the wheel. Provenance, rumored private collection, Sicily, 19 to 20th C. Chain of custody uncertain, no decisive documentation located at time of writing. Condition, prior over varnish removed using standard solvent protocol documented. No active structural instability observed. Surface readings consistent with period practice. Iconography, floral border with geometric medallion. Potential regional motif. Further study pending. Phrases that said everything and nothing. Doors that were not doors. When she finished, the page looked so convincingly dull, she wanted to applaud herself and weep. She scanned it, saved at a lab server with 3 redundant file names. Printed a copy for the binder trustees rarely read. You're good, Lucan said, approval quiet as breath. I'm terrified, she said. Those coexist, he said. Often. At 5 to 12, she covered the panel again, switched off the lamps, washed her hands, and hung her lab coat on its hook like a person who obeyed schedules. At 3 to 12, she signed out the staff desk with a nod so ordinary it made her heart ache with longing for a life that could stay that way. At 12 exactly, the museum bloomed into lunchtime chatter. Elena slipped sideways into the sound and let it carry her toward the door that remembered being a gate. Outside, the sky had not decided on weather. She kept her head down, moved through tourists and office workers, took a wrong turn on purpose, doubled back, used a crowd as a cloak. By the time she reached St. Dunstan in the east, her lungs had learned to breathe like a thief. The church ruin waited, vines fingering stone, trees shouldering their green up through absence. It smelled of leaves and old things forgiven. Lucan stood in the nave that was no longer a nave, looking up into a sky where the ceiling should have been. When he saw her, something like relief softened his face. Good, he said. You came. I said I would, she replied, surprised at the steadiness of her voice. And I said I would show you, he said, stepping toward the shadow where a wall met root and light. He crouched, pressed his palm against a section of stone that looked like all the other stones. It looked like all the other stones, until it didn't. The mortar line breathed, then loosened, then remembered a hinge. A rectangle of darkness gaped where wall had been. Elena stared at the opening and felt the ring flare hot against her skin, not burning her, but warning like a bell. Under rock, under city, under everything she had called ordinary. Lucan rose and offered his hand. Not a demand, not a rescue, an invitation. Down here, he said, voice low, where the first seal was made before anyone thought to name it. Elena looked at his hand, at the dark, at the trees shivering lightly in a wind that had not reached them, and she realized with clarity the hurt. She had already said yes when she uncovered the panel this morning. She took his hand and stepped into the city's throat. Chapter 3. Beneath the Stones. The air changed as soon as Elena stepped inside. It was not merely cooler, though coolness poured down the throat of stone. It was not merely darker, though the absence of light pressed close, tactile as cloth. The air shifted. It felt older, heavier, filled with the weight of words once spoken and never allowed to leave. Lucan did not release her hand until her footing steadied on the first worn step. The opening behind them narrowed, the wall remembering its hinge, and a muted hush sealed them inside. The stairwell corkscrewed downward, cut from stone too ancient to belong to London. Water stains striped the walls, whispering of centuries of seepage. Elena clutched the railing carved into the rock, heart pounding with each descent. You built this? She asked, her voice thinner than she intended. I guarded it, Lucan said, long after it was built, long after the ones who carved it had names. The ring at her throat pulsed with every step, as if recognizing the rhythm of descent. She pressed her palm against it, half hoping quiet it, half desperate to prove she was not alone inside her own body. At last the stair widened into a chamber. Candles, not museum electric mockeries, but honest flame, burned in sconces that should have been empty. Shadows leaned long across the walls. In the center, a shallow basin of stone collected water that trickled from a fissure above. The surface gleamed black as obsidian. Elena halted, unwilling to cross the threshold. What is this place? Lucan stepped to the basin, kneeling, his hand hovering above the surface without touching. The first anchor. The rock that remembers when London was not London, when the river was smaller, and the land was called by names you will not find on maps. The water rippled though nothing touched it. Shapes formed. Sigils she had seen traced in vapor by the ring. The thorn leaf, the folded wings, the seed. Each burned faintly on the black mirror before dissolving again. Elena's throat tightened. It's the same three. Lucan glanced back at her. The seal is fractal, repeating, smaller within larger, larger within smaller. When one breaks, the others strain. That is why you felt it through the panel, why the ring burned. Elena moved closer despite the fear screaming in her blood. She peered into the basin. Her reflection stared back, fragmented by ripples. Her face multiplied into three versions, one pale with fear, one hardened with defiance, one unreadable, caught between. She reached out, instinct stronger than caution. The water shivered beneath her fingers, though she did not touch. Her reflection's three faces blurred and merged, becoming something else entirely. A silhouette with wings folded, made of ash. Lucan's hand closed around her wrist, steady but firm. Not yet. The vision collapsed. The water stilled. Only her face remained, wide-eyed, throat tight. You said this was an anchor, she whispered. So it holds a seal closed. What happens if it breaks? Lucan's expression was shadowed, unreadable. Then what is kept beneath rock does not stay beneath rock. And London will remember that it sits on bones older than empire. Before she could answer, the candles guttered violently. A draft roared to the chamber, though no door had opened. The water in the basin boiled without heat, bubbling up into shapes that strained toward her like grasping hands. Elena stumbled back. What's happening? They've scented you, Lucan said, rising, his coat flaring as though caught by invisible wind. The other side knows you come below. They'll test the anchor. The water burst upward in a column of black spray, striking the ceiling and raining down as if the chamber itself wept ink. From the darkness, a voice coiled, layered and feminine, the same that had haunted the phone line. Do not trust what has already fallen. Elena clapped her hands over her ears. It's in my head. Lucan moved between her and the basin, arms spread wide as though to shield her from sound itself. His voice cut through the echo like iron. She is not yours. The basin cracked. A fissure zigzagged across its lip, water spilling down the steps in a rush that smelled of salt and rust. The candles guttered again, then roared higher, flames bending toward the fissure as if drawn. Elena staggered forward before she realized what she was doing. She pressed her palm against a broken stone, the ring searing against her skin. A shock surged through her arm, pain and clarity braided together. The fissure sealed. The water stilled. The voice cut off mid-syllable, leaving silence thick as burial cloth. Her knees buckled. Lucan caught her, lowering her to the ground gently. You answered, he said. The seal listened. Elena gasped, fighting for breath. I didn't know what I was doing. You didn't need to, Lucan said softly. Blood remembers. She wanted to argue, to deny, to demand again who she was supposed to be, but exhaustion drowned her words. The last thing she saw before her eyes closed was Lucan's face, still watchful, carrying a sorrow so deep it looked permanent. When darkness took her, it smelled not of ash this time, but of almond blossoms drifting over Sicilian soil. Chapter 4. Canary Bones. Elena woke to the sound of water thinking, not the drip-drip of a leak or the slow ache of pipes, but a low, conversational murmur, as if the river itself had found a throat and leaned close. She dragged herself upright on cold stone, head buzzing, palm throbbing where it had met the fissure. The ring lay against her skin, cooler now, not ember but pulse. Candles burned steadily again. The basin was whole, its surface black and calm. Lucan crouched a short distance away, watching her with the wary patience of someone who had learned to let the newly awakened take inventory of their bones. "How long?" she asked, voice hoarse. "Minutes," he said. "You fainted because you poured yourself into a place that remembers being empty. It wanted to keep you. I asked it not to. And it listened to you. It listened to the seal I used to be." A shadow crossed his face. "And to the fact that you carry the key it has been starving for." Elena looked at her palm. A faint mark, 3 pale arcs, had risen where the ring had pressed into skin. Not a burn, not ink, a reminder. She closed her hand around it, as if secrecy could make it less true. "You said there were 3 anchors," she said, pushing to her feet. Her legs answered, shaky but serviceable. "Under rock, under water, and the seed that moves." Lucan stood, offering no hand this time. She was grateful for the dignity. "The water anchor is the hungriest. It's where the other side has always had advantage. Current carries rumor faster than stone." She glanced at the basin. "Then we go to the river." "We go to the places the river doesn't admit to being," Lucan said. "Backstairs and forgotten mouths. London is riddled with wells and culverts left off respectable maps. The one we need wakes when the tide turns. When—" Lucan's head tilted, as if listening to something through rock. "Soon." He moved to the wall and pressed the hinge back into remembering. The seam closed with a sigh. The ruin's ordinary light spilled through the crack before the stone sealed. When they emerged, St. Dunstan in the east looked unchanged. Leaves fingering sky, tourists reading plaques, a woman on a bench crying quietly into a paper cup. Elena blinked at sunlight as if she had been underwater for hours. Perhaps, in a way, her phone had molten messages. "Where are you?" From Allison. "Trustees moved up 11:15. Hey, then, donor loved the peak. No disasters. Come back when you can." Elena's lungs remembered oxygen. You should breathe," Lucan said, already angling them toward an alley that smelled faintly of rain, "and walk where the city slumps toward water." They cut through back streets where deliveries were the shape of vans, and gulls argued over invisible laws. The closer they drew to the embankment, the louder London sounded, not in decibels, but in age. Pubs squatted where monasteries had learned to be patient. Office towers stood on Roman knees. Who were the voices? Elena asked, keeping pace because the only alternative was falling behind. On the phone, in the water. A chorus, Lucan said, what the custodians call their saints. It's a lie they tell themselves to make feeding sound like sacrament. And Matteo? A mouth with expensive shoes, Lucan said without heat, and a good memory for which pocket hold which knife. They crossed toward the Thames. The tide had turned, the river tugging itself in a direction that felt wrong if you were used to seas obeying maps. Lucan led her to a section of embankment most people pass without seeing, where the disused stair slunk down to a muddy tongue of foreshore exposed by tide's retreat. You know this is illegal, Elena said, because saying it steadied the part of her that needed rules. Only for people who forget what a river is, Lucan said, and began to descend. The smell hit first. Brine metal, the sharp tang of old coins and older secrets. The mud glistened, crowded with broken blue and white pottery, nail heads, the odd bottleneck polished into a jewel by time. Mudlarks stooped at a distance, heads down, eyes trained to hear value with their hands. Lucan stopped at the waterline, where the river lapped like a dog that had learned manners. He crouched, touched the surface, then flicked the droplets away as if greeting and declining in the same breath. Here, Elena asked, dubious. In the open, with joggers and treasure hunters for an audience? In the open, he agreed, where it will pretend to be less dangerous because it is being watched. He gestured to a lump of stone half swallowed by mud, unremarkable until you looked sideways and saw geometry where nature had tried to erase it. A circle notched by 3 lines. A triskelion softened by centuries of tide. Elena's ring warmed. Underwater, she breathed. Under mouth, Lucan corrected. This is where the city learned to drink. Wells bled into river, river into wells. The seal here was never meant to be beautiful, only difficult. He took a step back and nodded at the stone, asking for its name. I don't, she almost laughed. Ask Mud its name? Ask, he said. Politely, it respects that. Elena crouched. River chill seeped through her jeans. She placed her fingertips on the stone, as if greeting a sleeping creature. Hello, she said softly, because how else do you begin? I need your name. For a moment, nothing, then a pressure, subtle as a memory, pushed back against her skin. A syllable formed under her hand, not in sound but in shape. She didn't hear it. She knew it. It felt like pebbles moving in a clay pipe, like the thunk of a bucket, finding water after a long drop. Bren, she said, the word leaving her mouth before her mind caught up. The river stilled. Not completely. Boats still cut lines through it. Wind still bothered it with small hands. But something in it held breath. Lucan's eyes flicked toward her in something like surprise that he tried to hide. It gave you a short name, he said. It likes you. That's good. It's less bad than if it had refused. He nodded toward the Triskelion. Now ask for what it's holding. Elena closed her eyes, making the world smaller, easy to balance. The word Bren sat warm on her tongue. She spoke to the stone the way she spoke to frightened collections interns. Confident, kind, unwilling to be lied to. Please, I need to see what you're keeping. Just to see. I won't take it. A thrum answered her palm. The mud shivered. A thin trickle of water ran from nowhere, tracing the Triskelion's blades. The ring at her throat pulsed, and beneath her fingers, the stone softened not into liquid, but into permission. An image shone in wet sheen, a sigil different from the three, a mark like a closed eye. It lingered just long enough for her to memorize its curve, then blurred back into muck. What is it? She asked, breathless. The debt mark, Lucan said. When the water seal holds, it taxes what passes above. Names. Promises. You. It will collect that later unless we teach it a different hunger. Elena rocked back on her heels. How do you teach a river not to eat what it wants? With a better story, Lucan said, and an object it respects. His gaze flicked her ring. Oh, no, she said automatically, fingers fly in her throat. You're not throwing my grandmother's ring into the Thames like some bridal offering to a god with unclear boundaries. Lucan's mouth twitched. We won't throw it. We'll ask it to touch and learn. I just got it to stop burning holes in me. Elena, he said, gentle and inexorable. If we don't feed the seal something that is yours to offer, it will take something that isn't. The custodians are counting on that. An offered bite keeps teeth from closing elsewhere. She looked at the stone, at the bristling tide, at the skyline busy with wanting. She thought Mateo smile of Allison's messages, of the basin cracking under a voice made of many mouths. She unclasped the chain. I want it back, she said, and the river made a sound that could have been a laugh if you were unkind. Elena lowered the ring until it kissed the Triskelion. Cold rushed up her arm, not physical but absolute, like stepping into a church at night alone. The short name she'd learned, Bren, pressed against her mind with the sleepy curiosity of a cat smelling a stranger. Just a touch, she told it, which was ridiculous because she was talking to a stone with a tide's attention. Just enough to learn. The ring warmed. The Triskelion brightened. For a heartbeat, Elena saw the seal the way it had been. Not mud and rumor, but bright geometry scribed on wet clay by a hand that shook from haste. A second hand, steadier, had pressed a smaller ring into the center, the same three-bladed mark from the panel's heart. She heard voices, human ones this time, arguing softly in an older form of her language. Keep it shut. Keep it safe. Not from God. From us. The vision snapped. The ring cooled. Elena drew it back to her chest, heart clattering. Did it learn? She asked. It learned you, Lucan said, and it agreed not to take what isn't offered. For a tide or two. That's not very long. It's longer than the time between breaths when you're drowning, he said. We bought space to find the third anchor before the custodians make their move. Elena slipped the ring over her head with hands that wanted to be steadier. You said the third anchor is the seed that moves. Where do we even start? With what moves people who think they don't move, Lucan said, markets, pilgrimages, trains. Once, it was caravans and saints' bones. Now it's data and containers. The seed hides where flow is heaviest because no one thinks to look there for a door. So, King's Cross, she said, only half joking. Or a data center? Closer, he said. His gaze lifted along the river to where cranes stood like patient birds. The docks pretended to die when containerization moved the heart east. They didn't. They learned new names and kept their old mouths. Docklands, she said, following his eyes. Canary Wharf. The world's money learned to walk there, Lucan said, and so did the seed. A gull screamed overhead, the sound like metal being taught to sing. The tide reversed its mind, inching back with small, insolent pulls. Lucan checked the sky with a habit that probably predated weather reports. We should go, he said, before a constable decides your boots are too clean for this mud. They climbed the stairs, Elena's legs remembering what gravity expects. At the top, the ordinary world waited. A family arguing about ice cream, a man selling coffee from a cart, a cyclist swearing at a tourist who dared exist. Elena's phone buzzed again. Allison, are you alive? If you're ghosting me, ghost me after I get through trustees. Dinner? Then, half a beat later, please say you're alive. I need to show my face at the museum, Elena said, or I'll have more than rivers trying to eat me. Go, Lucan said. Act like a person for an hour. Keep your phone on you. If the donor crest calls again, don't answer. And Mateo? Mateo will answer to someone else first. He angled his body slightly, eyes focusing on a point behind her. Elena turned. The crowd parted the way crowds do for things they don't know they're parting for. Mateo strolled along the embankment as if he were on a pleasant errand. He spotted them instantly because of course he did. A smile clicked into place. Miss Caruso, he said, stopping at a conversational distance. What a coincidence. Elena's body decided to be two things at once, terrified and furious. You have a talent for being where you shouldn't. Occupational hazard, he said. You look well. Sleep agrees with you. He glanced past her at the river, then at Lucan. The smile cooled by a degree. Guardian. Lucan's stillness became a weapon. Courier. A thought occurred to me, Mateo said mildly. Provenance. It is such a fragile thing. Easy to lose. Easy to improve. If a document were to surface, a generous donor's letter clarifying origins, how grateful your trustees would be. How cooperative. Elena's mouth went dry. Forgery. Framing, Mateo corrected. A more elegant word. We can write you a past that makes tomorrow easier. His gaze touched the chain at her throat. We are very good at writing pasts. Elena felt the ring's heat against her skin, a small, stubborn ember refusing to go out. I already have one, she said, and it doesn't involve your pen. Something flickered in Mateo's expression, a tick of irritation, quickly smoothed. You will call me when you are finished attending otherwise, he said. Everyone does. He turned, as if nothing of consequence had been exchanged, and strolled away, whistling a tune that made the hairs on Elena's arms stand up. It took her a second to place it. A lullaby. Sicilian. Her grandmother had sung it when storms want to come through the windows. Lucan waited until Mateo's back was swallowed by pedestrian noise. They'll push the paper angle hard, he said. If the seal won't open, they'll pry at the hinges around it. Titles, stamps, sentiment. You did well not to negotiate. I wanted to punch him, she said, surprised at the violence in her mouth. That's a form of negotiation. Lucan said dryly. Satisfying. Rarely useful. Elena exhaled, chest loosening by degrees. Museum first, then Docklands. Lucan nodded, already stepping sideways into the space that shadows use as doors. I'll meet you when the buildings start pretending to be ships. And if the phone rings? Let it drown, he said and was gone. Elena looked down at her palm. The 3 pale arcs had faded almost entirely, as if the skin had decided to keep its secrets inside. She tightened her fist, then let it go. The river beside her breathed, a slow, giant animal choosing, for now, not to bite. She turned her feet toward the museum and began to walk, rehearsing her face back into something trustees trusted. Somewhere beneath the pavement, the city murmured its underwater names, and for the first time in her life, she realized London was not a place you lived in, but a thing that agreed to live with you if you asked nicely and paid attention. She intended, from now on, to pay both. The afternoon trustees meeting blurred past Elena in a haze of polite smiles and curated sentences. She stood beside Allison while donors praised a miracle restoration, asking about pigments and varnish, as if the panel were nothing more than chemistry and patience. Elena's mouth delivered practice phrases, solvent ratios, humidity control, heritage value, while her mind replayed the river's name, Bren. By the time she escaped, London's light was already tilting gold. She texted Allison a vague promise of dinner, pocketed her phone before further questions could find her, and set her course east. The Docklands rose like a second city built on the bones of first. Glass towers shimmered above water that once moored ships heavy with sugar and slaves, ships that fed and starved in equal measure. Canary Wharf glittered with money's confidence, a forest of mirrored windows pretending not to notice the tide. Elena crossed the plaza with its polished stone and sculptures no one loved. Her boots clicked against surfaces too clean, too controlled. She hated how small she felt among the towers, like a visitor inside someone else's dream. Lucan waited by the water's edge where the Thames curved through steel. He did not look out of place. If anything, he looked like the ghosts of towers were built over. His eyes found her immediately, as though the crowd were nothing but mist. "You came," he said. "I said I would." "Words are easy to spend," Lucan murmured. "The test is in the walking." She joined him, hands deep in her coat. "You said the seed hides where flow is heaviest." She gestured at the skyline. "This enough flow for you?" "Plenty." He nodded toward a squat building dwarfed by towers, brick older than its neighbors, a survivor that had learned to wear modern glass like a borrowed jacket. That one remembers ships. Beneath it, the seed. They slipped through the revolving doors with a small crowd of office workers. Security scanners blinked, indifferent. The lobby gleamed sterile, corporate art stretching along one wall. Lucan moved as if he belonged. Elena followed, heart battering at her ribs. A service corridor led to stairs, and the stairs led downward, deeper than elevators admitted. Concrete replaced polish. The air thickened with the smell of rust, and water never quite dry. Lucan paused at a rusting door stamped maintenance. He pressed his palm to it. The metal groaned, shuddered, then clicked open. "What did you just do?" Elena whispered. "I reminded it of an older lock," he said. The passage beyond was narrow, lined with dripping pipes. It sloped downward, the hum of machinery masking the sound of their steps. Elena's ring warmed, faint but insistent, tugging her towards something ahead. The corridor widened into a chamber half-flooded, its floor a shallow pool reflecting the ceiling's lattice of pipes. At the center, raised on stone that looked Roman and wrong beneath modern London, lay a sigil carved deep into the floor. Unlike the leaf or wings or seed, this one resembled a spiral coil, unspooling endlessly. "The moving seed," Lucan said. "Here." The water trembled, though no current touched it. Elena crouched, drawn without choice. Her reflection in the pool fractured, multiplied. For an instant she saw herself stepping through 3 doors at once. One into fire, one into shadow, one into nothing. Her breath caught. "What does it mean?" "That your choice is close," Lucan said. His voice was softer now, carrying something like regret. "The seed waits for the hand that will plant again, or tear it out by the root." The water surged. A shape rose from the pool, tall, faceless, built of liquid, with arms that remembered being wings. Its voice spilled across the chamber like a tide. "Daughter of rings, give us the seed, and we will unburden you." Elena staggered back. Lucan's hand closed around her arm. "Don't answer," he warned. But the voice pressed on, whispering inside her bones. "You carry chains that were forged before you. Hand them over. Rest." Her grandmother's ring seared against her throat. Images crashed behind her eyes. Almond blossoms in storm. Children running through fields on fire. Lucan standing guard over shadows too wide for one man. "I don't want chains," she whispered. The faceless shape bent closer, water dripping from his body into the pool, each drop a word. "Then give them to us." Elena looked at Lucan. His expression was carved from sorrow and defiance both. "If you give it away," he said, "you'll never get it back, and the world will have one less wall between it and hunger." Her pulse pounded. The chamber trembled. She realized with dizzy clarity that the seed was not a thing hidden in stone. It was her blood, her choice. The water surged higher, pressing at her knees, demanding. Lucan drew her behind him, coat flaring like broken wings. "Back!" he growled at the shape. "She isn't yours." The faceless thing hissed, collapsing into the pool with a roar that rattled the pipes. Water sprayed, then stilled, leaving only ripples and silence. Elena clung to Lucan's arm, breath ragged. "They know me. They've always known you," he said. "The question is whether you will know yourself before they convince you otherwise." Above them, the building's foundations groaned like an old ship remembering storms. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed. Lucan released her arm gently. "We need to leave. The custodians won't wait long now." Elena stared at the spiral carved into stone, water gleaming in its grooves like veins. She felt the ring pulse one word into her skin. Choose. But she didn't. Not yet. Chapter 5. Night with Edges. The museum after hours had its own heartbeat. Elena knew it well. Lamps on timers, air handlers sighing, guards walking practice loops. Tonight, though, the rhythm faltered. Every corridor seemed to lean toward her, as if the walls knew she carried something she hadn't chosen. She returned from Docklands with mud still on her boots, and the seed spiral burned into her thoughts. Allison had texted twice, "Dinner? You alive?" But Elena hadn't answered. She pushed through the staff entrance and let the hum of fluorescent lights try to convince her she was back in the ordinary world. It didn't work. The conservation lab looked unchanged. The panel slept beneath its cotton cover, but the air held a residue, faint and bitter. Smoke. Elena's stomach clenched. She tugged the cover back. The medallion glowed faintly, not with warmth, with memory. The seal crack shimmered, like a scar learning to breathe, and at its center, where the triskelion met, a fine dust of ash traced the grooves, as though fire had brushed it while she was away. "Not again," she whispered. A voice answered from the doorway. "Not again." Still. Matteo leaned against the frame, suit impeccable, smile too sharp. "You've been busy, Miss Caruso." Stairs under ruins, mud by the river, whispers in the Docklands. "Do you think we don't see?" Elena's pulse jumped. "You followed me." "Followed?" "No." He stepped inside, shutting the door behind him with deliberate care. "We watched. We have always watched. Custodianship demands vigilance." He circled the table, not touching the panel, just orbiting like a hawk. "You feel the hunger now, don't you? The pull. It isn't curse, it's vocation. You carry what your blood promised. Give it shape. Give it to us." Elena backed against the workbench, fingers groping for anything heavy. "And then what? You open every door and call it salvation." Matteo's eyes gleamed. "We open what should never have been locked. We restore balance. You of all people should understand restoration." The word struck her like a slap. Restoration is care, not destruction. "Perspective," Matteo said, soft as poison. He reached into his jacket and drew a folder, laying it on the table beside the panel. Papers, stamped and signed, each carrying the museum's crest. Provenance rewritten, donor letters, trustee approvals, all forged with such perfection that even Allison would believe them. One signature. Matteo said, "Yours." The panel returned to Palermo, to its rightful guardians. You sleep without fire in your blood. The ring cools. Simple. Elena stared at the folder, heart hammering. The papers looked real. Too real. She could almost see Allison's relieved smile when handed clean provenance. She could almost feel the weight of silence. No more petals, no more voices in water. Peace bought with ink. Lucan's voice cut the air. Don't. He emerged from the shadow near the cabinets, eyes like storms learning shape. Matteo didn't startle. He had expected him. Their gazes locked like old enemies rehearsing an argument. You were always sentimental, Matteo sneered. Protecting seals that rot, defending a world that doesn't want you. Look at yourself, an oath-breaker playing guard dog. Pathetic. Lucan's jaw tightened. Better pathetic than treacherous. Elena gripped the bench, caught between them. Stop. Her voice cracked, but they did stop, both turning to her. Two forces pulling in opposite directions, and she was a hinge. Why me? She demanded. Why does every shadow in this city know my name? Because your family carried the ember, Matteo said smoothly. They kept it alive whether they knew or not. Now it burns in you, and fire spreads. Lucan shook his head. Because the seal chose you. Not blood, not papers. Choice. That's what frightens them. He nodded at Matteo. He doesn't fear power. He fears someone who might refuse to give it. Matteo's smile thinned. Refusal is temporary. Hunger is not. He tapped the folder with one elegant finger. Sign, Miss Caruso. Set yourself free. The ring scorched against her chest. Pulsing like a second heart, ash lifted from the panel, swirling faintly into the air. Elena clutched the chain, torn. One path promised silence, the other endless storms. She wanted neither. She wanted her life back. The fire alarm screamed. Red strobes lit the lab, shadows jerking across the walls. Smoke poured under the door, acrid and choking. Matteo snapped the folder shut, eyes cold. Decide quickly. Flames are excellent at forcing honesty. He slipped toward the door, vanishing into smoke like a man walking home. Lucan grabbed Elena's arm. Not this way. The custodians are burning their own trail. Where? She coughed, eyes watering. Archives, Lucan said. Below ground. Stone remembers better than steel. Move. They plunged into the corridor, alarms wailing, staff shouting, sprinklers sputtering too late. Elena's lungs burned as much from fear as smoke. They shoved through a stairwell door, barreling down into the archives, where parchment and bone waited in chill silence. The fires roared dimmed above. The archive vaults hummed with containment systems, shelves towering with documents no donor remembered. Lucan led her past crates, past glass cases, until they reached a narrow alcove lined with medieval charters. Here, the smoke did not follow. The air was damp, cold, solid. Safe for the moment. Elena pressed against the wall, chest heaving. They'll destroy the museum just to get me? To get the seal, Lucan said grimly. You are only the path. He studied her, eyes fierce. But they won't stop at fire. Next they'll ask again, nicely, and again, until you decide whether your answer is yes or whether you're willing to carry the weight of no. Above them, the fire alarm keened. Below, the archive seemed to pulse, as if even old parchment knew a war had entered its silence. Elena shut her eyes. The ring whispered one word into her bones. Choose. The archive door thudded shut behind them with the sound of a book closing on a hand. Above, sprinklers hissed, and the fire alarm keened a thin, relentless note. Down here, the noise arrived as a memory, dulled by stone, made bearable by age. Elena pressed the heel of her hand to her sternum to quiet the drum of her heart. The ring answered, not with heat, but with a steady insistence, a pulse spelling one word she was beginning to hate. Choose. Breathe, Lucan said, not unkindly. He moved through the alcove like he belonged to it, eyes flicking over shelf marks, fingertips hovering just shy of vellum, as if the air between skin and text were itself a page to be read. They want you panicked. Panicked people sign things. I'm not signing anything, she said, and heard the tremor in her own voice. Lucan glanced at her, approval brief as a nod. Good. Then we use the time their fire bought us. A red emergency light strobed along the corridor, turning the medieval charters a bloody shade of old snow. Elena forced herself to focus on the living facts, labels, dates, provenance codes. She had spent years down here, half her life in rooms that smelled of paper and glue. The familiarity steadied her. "What are we looking for?" she asked. "A scar," Lucan said, "made of ink." Elena snorted, surprise at the sound, half laugh, half disbelief. "That narrows it down." "In this case," he said, "yes." He stopped before a run of deeds and quitclaims from the 14th century. His finger traced the edge of a parchment roll, not touching. "Here." Elena stepped in. The document in question looked unremarkable. A charter in cramped Latin hand, seal ribbon long gone. Witness list thick with names in which every man was John, Thomas, or Henry. But once he said scar, she saw it. A faint darkening along the bottom margin. Not from damp or smoke. Older, purposeful. As if something had been written, then washed, then written again. The vellum had learned to hide it. The way skin learns to make a story out of damage. "Pull it," she asked. Lucan nodded. She slid the roll free and laid it on the felted table, under raking light. The scar bled a shade darker. Elena reached for the UV torch the archive kept for exhibitions and fraud. "If this is a prank from some board clerk in 1390, I'm going to—" The words died. Under UV, the margin bloomed with ghost letters. Not Latin, not English. The same shallow ridges she'd seen around the medallion's blossoms, repeating here as if an older hand had borrowed a younger document's body. The triskelion unfurled delicate as breath. Beside it, 3 small marks, a leaf, paired wings folded, a seed spiraled tight. And beneath those, a short line and a hand that made Elena's throat burn with recognition. Not because she'd seen it before, but because it moved the way the ring moved. "What does it say?" she whispered. Lucan's eyes shone a little in the UV wash. "Not words. Directions." He pointed to a tiny notation that at first glance looked like a flourish. Old surveyors marked distances by prayers. Steps between saints, measured by the time it takes to say an avenue. Elena blinked. "You're telling me the secret map is a rosary with extra math. If that helps you remember it," he said. She traced a line of the note in the air, memorizing its cadence. A prayer's worth of steps from this shelf to the corner pillar. 2 from there to the north wall. 3 to a blank stretch of masonry no one looked at because blank things are generous that way. She turned, feeling foolish and intensely alive, and counted. Avenue corner. Ave Ave wall. Ave Ave Ave. Her fingers met stone. Not smooth, not cement. Old blocks dressed polite, to look modern. She leaned in. The mortar line at chest height had the faintest convex swell, as if something beneath had woken up and pushed outward. "It's here," she said, startled by the certainty in her mouth. Lucan joined her, palm hovering. "Ask it." She almost argued, then she didn't. "Please," she said to Brick the way she'd spoken a river. "I need to see." Her ring warmed. The mortar softened under her hand, not dissolving, not cracking, remembering. A line drew itself faintly in the stone, 3 arcs joining at a point. The triskelion's blades flared then paled. A seam appeared where no seam had been, as neat as a book spine. Lucan slid his fingers into the line and pressed. Stone yielded like careful cloth. The wall side opened a hand's breadth, then more, revealing a cavity no bigger than a shoebox. Inside, wrapped in dark cloth that had survived centuries by refusing to be noticed, lay a bundle. Elena reached. "Slow," Lucan warned, and she obeyed without thinking, lifting the bundle with the reverence of a nurse taking a newborn from a stranger's arms. She unwrapped it on the table. 2 objects lay within, a folded letter, brittle with age, and a small circular device that was not modern, not medieval, not something that belonged to any cabinet she had ever catalogued. The letter's outer fold bore a name that struck her chest like a bell. Caruso. Her hands went untrustworthy. She let Lucan slide the letter open for her. The ink had browned almost to decay, but the hand was sure. Italian, not Latin. Sicilian, softening the edges. The date, 1937. To the one who wears the ring when we are ash. It began. We did what we could with what we had. Not for God, for the living. The seal under rock will try to love you to death. The seal underwater will try to feed you to yourself. The moving sea will offer rest that costs the rest of the world. We cannot be saints. We chose to be stubborn. If you are reading this, you carry our stubbornness. Elena's vision blurred. She blinked hard until the words corrected into sense. We were not alone. A guardian watched the door while we pretended to be doing inventory. He is not a story. He is a person. If he has fallen now, it is because he chose to fall toward the ones he was told not to touch. Trust is not a sacrament. It is a decision you make each time he fails to be what the old words demand. If you must choose the living over the lovely promise. Lucan's jaw worked once, then stilled. He looked away as if embarrassed to be seen. Elena kept reading, even though the letters wanted to dance. We made a compass that is not a compass. It does not point north. It points where the seal is being lied to. When you turn it, it will want to spin forever. Tell it no. Tell it where you stand, and it will give you the closest false thing wearing a true face. Do not be polite. Politeness is how doors are tricked into opening. She set the letter down, hands shaking. They wrote to me, she said, and hated how small and amazed she sounded. They wrote to me. They wrote to the one who would listen. Lucan said, voice low. Elena touched the circular device. It looked like a pocket compass had married a reliquary. Instead of a needle, 3 blades curled beneath glass, overlapping like petals. A ring-shaped channel circled the face, etched with tiny marks that might have been letters or numbers, or the shadows left by them. The casing was brass gone soft with age, its edge worn where a thumb would live. She lifted it. It was heavier than it looked. The ring at her throat pulsed, and the 3 blades under glass trembled as if scenting weather. How does it work? She asked. By argument, Lucan said, you insist. It relents. She exhaled and did the ridiculous thing that had become her life. Holding the device level on her palm, she said, quiet because the archive was a place that deserved quiet. No spinning. Show me the nearest lie that is pretending to be the seal. For a heartbeat, the blades jittered like a trapped moth. Then, with the offended dignity of a cat deciding to obey because it chooses to, the top blade steadied, pointing, not north, not south, but toward the freight elevator at the end of the corridor. Elena frowned. The elevator? Lucan's mouth tightened. The archive's other door. The one for crates. Elena said, realization creeping in. And off-site transfers. And emergency evacuations. And fire drills staged by people who bring their own fire, Lucan finished. The emergency light strobed again. Voices echoed distantly. Security calling codes, radios rasping. The air in the archive thickened by a degree, the way it does when a lot of human decisions are happening upstairs. Elena's phone buzzed. Allison, we're okay. Fire contained. 1 corridor scorched. Where are you? Please answer. Elena typed, archives. Safe. Then, be careful who asks to move the panel. She hovered, then added, if anyone shows paperwork, call me first. Typing dots. Then, Mateo's in the boardroom. He says he's helping coordinate salvage. A beat. Do I trust him? Elena felt something in her chest choose itself. No. The ring said, and for once her mouth agreed. No. Stall. I'm coming. She shoved the phone away. They'll try to move the panel under pretext, she said. Fire is the story. The crate is the mouth. Lucan nodded. And the elevator is a throat. What happens if they get out? They don't get it out, he said, with a certainty that would have sounded like arrogance from anyone else. From him, it was a promise he'd already suffered for. But they will try. He looked at the letter again, eyes on the line about guardians falling. Whatever passed across his face. He hit like a man who has learned that grief is a door enemies will use. Take the compass, he said. It will sulk if I hold it. Elena pocketed it, the weight settling like a new bone. She wrapped the letter with more care than she had unwrapped it and slid it back into cloth. The seam in the wall waited, expectant. She returned the bundle to the cavity, not because she trusted any hiding place to stay hidden, but because some things should sleep where they chose to be tired. The wall remembered itself and closed. Ready? Lucan asked. No, Elena said. But yes. They moved as the archive taught. Fast feet, careful hands. Nothing that could snag a page or a life. At the corridor's end, the freight elevator's panel blinked a ready lie. Lucan pressed the call button, then stepped aside, listening with his whole body. The shaft hummed. Somewhere above, machinery decided on obedience. When the door slid open, the car was empty. They stepped in. Lucan hit G, then with 2 quick knuckles, a code Elena didn't see. The door shut. As they ascended, she felt the peculiar weight of a small room full of future. The compass in her pocket twitched, then pointed at the seam between doors as if to say there with impatience. Do you have to be cryptic with objects too? Elena muttered. They respond a tone, Lucan said, deadpan. The doors parted onto a loading bay that smelled of diesel and wet cardboard. People yelled things that sounded helpful while doing things that weren't. A crate sat square in the middle of the floor, standard museum build, foam-lined, labeled with care. Too fast. Too ready. Mateo stood beside it with a clipboard and a reflective vest he'd acquired from somewhere. The uniform of a man who had decided to look official because official gets fewer questions. 2 facilities men hovered, uneasy in that particular way of people whose instincts had not been paid enough to stay quiet. Elena stepped out of the elevator and put her body between the crate and the corridor. Stop, she said, and her voice surprised her by carrying. Mateo looked up, all polite relief. Miss Caruso. Thank God. We were just arranging a precautionary. No, she said. A beat. The word lay there between them, small and made of iron. Mateo laughed softly. Decisive. Admirable. Unhelpful. Elena took a step forward. She didn't feel brave. She felt like a person with mud on her boots and ash in her lungs who had run out of permission to be careful. The ring warmed. In her pocket. The compass blade nudged her hip like a cat demanding to be let out. She drew the compass and held it flat on her palm like a threat. The 3 blades jittered and then locked, not toward Mateo or the crate, but toward a roll-up door at the far end of the bay where a van waited with its engine ticking the language of impatience. That, she said, pointing, is your lie. Mateo's eyes flicked to the device, then to Lucan, calculation moving behind them like fish. You don't want a scene, he said kindly, as if discussing a menu. Let's help you. The museum will be grateful. Your supervisor will be grateful. You will be... Quiet. Elena asked. Uncomplicated? Easily filed. Mateo's smile stayed on his mouth and left his eyes. Ho. The word landed with the seductive weight of bed after a long day. Ho. No more voices. No more heat. No more being a hinge. Just a clean line between before and after. Elena's body ached with wanting it. Her grandmother's ring went hot enough to sting. Wholeness, Lucan said softly, that requires forgetting is only a prettier word for amputation. Mateo's patience thinned. Enough. Move aside. No. The word came easier the second time. Elena stepped closer to the crate until her knees touched wood. You don't get to rewrite the museum because you brought your own fire. Miss Caruso, Mateo said, gentleness wrung out of him. You think this is about a panel and a girl with a ring. It is about the city remembering what it is allowed to eat. You cannot stop that. Maybe not, she said, but I could say no in the one place you need a yes. For an instant, the loading bay balanced on a knife. Facilities men looked at their shoes. The van engine ticked. The roll-up door trembled in its tracks with the weight of the wind. The compass blade in her palm quivered, then steadied again, stubborn as a prayer. Mateo exhaled the way men do when they've decided to be more explicit. He lifted the clipboard the way one might lift a weapon. We're done pretending, he said. Move. Lucan shifted, caught a shadow, deciding it could be a wall. She said no. Security burst into the bay then. 2 guards, a supervisor, Allison behind them with a soot smear on her cheek and fury in her eyes. She took in a tableau in one sweep. The crate, the van, the men in reflective vests, Elena with a brass circle in her hand. Lucan where shadows make doors. What the hell? Allison said, voice gone calm with dangerous restraint. "Is going on in my loading bay?" Matteo smiled like a man who had rehearsed for this audience. "Assisting with emergency salvage per donor request. We have paperwork." "No, you don't," Allison said, not taking her eyes off Elena. "Do you?" Elena met her gaze and, for once, did not flinch from being seen. "You told me once there's a difference between being from London and being of it," she said. Her voice shook and held anyway. "Today I'm going to be of it. The panel stays." Silence spread like water. Then security did what people usually do when someone talks like they know where they stand. They sided with the person who wasn't sweating. "Step away from the crate, sir," the supervisor said to Matteo. Matteo's smile cut itself. He slid the clipboard to his side and offered Allison a bow so shallow it was an insult. "As you wish. For today." He passed Elena close enough that she caught the faintest thread of his cologne, citrus over iron. "You will call me when no is too heavy to carry," he murmured. "Everyone does." He walked toward the van. The roll-up door rattled upward to swallow him. The bay breathed out. Allison turned to Elena, to the compass, to the ring, to Lucan and back. "You are going to tell me everything," she said. "Yes," Elena said, "but not here." Allison nodded once. "Fine. The panel gets an escort and a sleepover in Vault B. And if anyone breathes near this crate without my signature, I will feed them to collections care." The guards grinned despite themselves. Orders found shapes. The emergency settled into paperwork. Lucan touched Elena's elbow. Pressure light. Question unspoken. She realized she was trembling. Not fear now, not exactly. The aftershock of a small word that had managed to be bigger than a fire. Her phone buzzed. A new message from an unknown number. The text as neat as a surgeon's sutures. "No is heavy. We will make it light." A link followed, then died, as if swallowed by the city between send and sea. Elena slipped the phone away. In her palm, the compass blades relaxed, overlapping like petals at night. The ring cooled, a steady warmth she could stand. The loading bay smelled of wet concrete and the fragile decency of people deciding not to be worse than they were 5 minutes ago. "Where now?" she asked Lucan, voice low. "Home," he said, surprising her. "You said no in public. Now you need to say it to yourself." She almost made a joke about baths and strong tea. Instead, she nodded. They left by the staff corridor that pretended to be just a corridor. As the door swung shut behind them, Elena looked back once. The crate sat where the light fell across it, stubborn and ordinary. Upstairs, the museum rethreaded itself around a scorch mark. Below, the archives held their breath in the knowledge that something had been taken and not taken. "No is heavy," she thought. She tightened her fingers around the weight in her pocket and decided she would carry it. Elena's flat had never been quiet the way it was that night. Not restful, edged. The kind of quiet that has opinions. She shut the door behind her and slid every bolt she owned. The city breathed through old sash windows. The radiator ticked a tired metronome. Upstairs, someone laughed at a show, the sound that proves an ordinary world still exists. She wanted to stand inside that laughter like a doorway. Lucan stopped just outside the threshold, one hand braced on the frame. He looked at the dim hall, like it might have rules he didn't get to write. "I'll stay in the stairwell," he said. Shadows are easier to argue with than locks. "You can come in," she said, then wondered if that invitation meant something in his vocabulary that it didn't in hers. He smiled without showing teeth. "If I do, the flat will start remembering me. I would rather it remembered you." Elena nodded, absurdly grateful for a boundary she didn't have to invent. "All right, if you hear me scream, kick the door." "I won't wait for the second scream." She almost said thank you. Instead, she lifted a hand and then let it fall, as if she were waving to a ferry already halfway across the river. Inside, routine tried to reassemble her. Kettle, mug, tea bag she disliked that promised calm. She set the compass on the table. The blades curled like sleeping petals, and laid the ring beside it for the first time since Nana had buckled the chain around her child neck and said semper. The skin there felt naked, unedited. She traced the faint arcs on her palm. Almost gone now, like bruises remembering to be skin again. Her phone trembled with need. Allison, vault B is sealed. Panel safe. Mateo graciously withdrew. I owe you gin. Then, also, who is the tall one in charcoal who keeps not being in security footage? Elena huffed a laugh that was too close to a sob. A complication. She typed, a good one. I think. 3 dots appeared and vanished. The universal sign for we are going to have a conversation that asks different questions than the ones I'm ready to answer. She slid the phone away. The letter from the archives had settled into her bones with a heaviness of finally being seen by the dead. To the one who wears a ring when we are ash. The kettle clicked off. She didn't pour. She chose the ring up and held it against the light. Plain, unshowy, the kind of gold that survives by refusing to be anyone's story. What did you make me for? She asked it. To be stubborn? I can do stubborn. The ring warmed, not with heat this time, but with a scent. Good. Stubborn, then. A soft sound at the door made her start. Not a knock. A brush, like a coat sleeve grazing wood. Before she could call out, Lucan's voice came through the door, low and controlled. Don't open. Her mouth went dry. Who? 2 of them, he said. Polite shoes. One has a toolkit that does not know how to fix anything. She moved silently to the peephole. Hall light. Yellow stairwell. A man in a high-vis jacket whose collar had never seen sweat, carrying a meter reader's clipboard. Another with a small case. Reflective vest too new. Both wore expressions borrowed from men who work for a living. One raised his hand to knock again, then, sweetening the lie, lowered it as if to telegraph patience. Gas check, the first called lightly. We've had reports on this line. Elena tasted iron. The compass on her table wobbled, then spun once in a lazy circle, offended. She picked it up and leveled it toward the door. The blade shivered together, pointing not at the men, not at the lock, but down to the door's base, where a thin twist of black thread lay along the threshold like a hair. A worm of smoke threaded from it, almost invisible. She hissed, They're trying to smoke me out. Or smoke you asleep, Lucan said. A pause. Step back. What are you? The door shook once, as if someone outside had leaned against a hard. A breath later the thread fizzed, failed, and bled into a sludge that looked like wet soot. The men in the corridor stiffened in unison, as if listening to an earpiece only they could hear. Then they retreated, steps tidy, vanishing down the stairs with the briskness of people who had not been there. Elena sagged against the inner wall, heart tumbling over itself. Do I want to know how you did that? Explain to the hallway that it would regret cooperating, Lucan said. It believed me. She let out a sound that almost laughed and almost cried and landed somewhere human. Do you ever sleep? When someone I'm guarding does. He paused, which means rarely. Her throat got tight in that treacherous way that makes kindness unbearable. You can sit on the stairs. I don't have a spare blanket. I have a spare towel. Keep it, he said, and she could hear the smile now. Thin as a promise that doesn't want to spook. I won't freeze. I remember winters that would make this building apologize. She set the mug aside, untouched, and went to the desk. The letter waited inside the folder she'd made for it, obedient as paper. The compass lay where she'd left it, blades now half open, as if listening. The words Noah's heavy rolled through her again like a tide. Okay, she told the room. Let's see what being stubborn looks like. She placed the compass flat, the ring in her palm. No spinning, she said. Show me the nearest false door my life believes is true. The top blade jerked like a bird startled by glass, then settled, pointing at a bookshelf she had assembled during a winter of being lonely and proud of it. Second shelf from the bottom, far right, a row of art catalogs, and 2 binders full of receipts and unglamorous adulthood. Elena frowned. Don't be dramatic. But when she slid the binders free, a slim gap opened that had not been there before, a hairline like the first crack in a glaze. She pressed. A panel nudged inward, the cheap kind of secret they add when landlords are bored. Inside, a narrow cavity, a cigar tin. her grandfather's brand, her stomach dove. She fumbled it open with nail and will. Inside lay 3 photographs, sepia gone soft with handling, and a scrap of newspaper in Italian, date barely legible. One photo, her grandparents, younger than her mother is now, standing in front of a church she didn't recognize, expressions fierce the way some smiles are. The second, a hand, nanas, wearing the ring. The third, a man she had never seen, standing where she met rock, his coat whipping back in wind. The same face as the sketch she had found once in her grandfather's attic and thought she had dreamed. A note on the back, in her grandfather's careful hand. Il custode che resta, the guardian who falls and stays. Her breath snagged. Lucan, she said, too loud for a sleeping building. A rustle outside, the softest cough a boot on stair. Yes. She opened the door before her fear could invent reasons not to and pressed the tin into his hands. His face, always composed, always a decision, lost balance. For an instant he looked like a man seeing his name written by someone he thought would never forgive him. He touched the photograph with the back of a knuckle, reverent in a way she had only ever seen around relics. This was taken before the war, he said, voice gone thin. Your grandparents were braver than I had any right to ask. They wrote to me, she said. It came out small, like a child stumbling into a room of adults she adored. They hid a letter in the archive. They built a compass. They told me to choose the living over the lovely promise. They were speaking about you, weren't they? Lucan's mouth trembled once, then steadied. They were speaking about all the things that pretend to be better than people. He handed the tin back like returning a newborn. And yes, she wanted to ask everything. Why he fell, what he had lost, what the old oats tasted like when you broke them. Instead, she asked the question the night had built around her. Am I going to survive this? Yes, he said without flinch. How can you know? Because you asked. He glanced at the compass on her table, the ring in her hand, the cheap towel she hadn't offered. People who ask don't confuse love with consumption. The Custodians do. Her phone buzzed again. Unknown number, same clinical neatness. Sleep. We will carry the rest. A link already dead. She blocked the number with a satisfaction, so petty it felt medicinal. Tomorrow, she said, we go back under? Or east? Or wherever the seed wants to make me into a parable. Tomorrow, Lucan agreed, but not alone, and not before your stubbornness gets a night to set. She almost argued. Then she looked at a silhouette in the stairwell, the way the building's thin light made edges where none existed, and she chose her that would still be here in the morning. Stay, she said. Outside. If you hear me forget how to say no, knock. I'll break the door. Fine. He inclined his head and settled onto the stair, like he had been carved for it. The city muttered to itself beyond the windows. The radiator reheated its opinions. Elena shut the door. Sleep flirted, then kept its distance. She lay in the dark and let the weight of no distribute itself through her body, like a blanket made of iron filings. The ring rested against her sternum. Cool now, steady. When dreams came, they were not drowning. They were roots moving through stone, patient and unstoppable, choosing where to be. She woke just before dawn to the taste of rain, and a syllable in her mouth that was not English and not Sicilian, round and old and shaped like a door that opens inward. She wrote in the notes app before it evaporated. Sora. The compass blades twitched on the table, as if they had been dreaming too. Lucan's voice came soft through the wood. You're awake. How do you? The building told me. A pause. It likes you. She laughed. One bark that felt like health. The building has taste. He didn't argue. What did you dream? She looked at the word again. Sora. It felt like a seed you could plant in your mouth. A name, she said. Or a door. Or both. We'll ask the city witch, he said. After coffee. After coffee, she agreed, and the ordinary word felt like a blessing. She rose, put water on, put the ring back on as if she were dressing a part she had been born for and only now recognized, slid the compass into her pocket where its weight could nag her spine straight, and opened the door. Lucan stood, uncrumpling from the stair without joints. He regarded her a second, as if measuring whether she had grown while the light changed. "You look more like yourself," he said. "Maybe I finally am," she said, surprised at herself at how much she wanted it to be true. He nodded toward the window where morning tried to convince London to be blue. "Ready?" "Ready." They stepped into a corridor that smelled of someone's burnt toast and the first rain. The city listened. Somewhere under rock, a basin held. Somewhere under water, the river practiced saying no to its own hunger. And east, where money taught glass to shine, something that called itself a seed rolled in its sleep and prepared to be argued with. Elena tightened her scarf, squared her shoulders, and followed the man who had fallen and stayed. Chapter 6. The City That Remembers. Morning draped London in a half-hearted drizzle, the kind that convinced umbrellas to betray you and coats to turn heavy. Elena walked beside Lucan with coffee warming her hands, the ring cool against her sternum, the compass sulking in her pocket. Ordinary details tried to convince her they were enough. They weren't. They took side streets, not the main arteries. Lucan moved like someone who heard footsteps 4 turns away. He spoke little, but when he did it was to point out things Elena had never noticed. A keystone older than the street anchored, a gargoyle with his mouth covered by centuries of soot, a doorway that had been bricked up too perfectly to be mere renovation. "London remembers," he said once. "It just pretends not to, and you can hear it." Elena asked, "I can hear what tries not to be heard. There's a difference." She sipped coffee, letting bitterness steady her nerves. "This word I dreamed, Sora, does it mean anything to you?" Lucan's gaze flicked to her, unreadable. "Say it again." She did. The sound shaped the air oddly, as though the drizzle leaned closer to listen. His jaw tightened. "It's not a word. It's a call." "For what?" "For whoever is still willing to answer." His expression grew darker. "Not all of them are kind." Elena rubbed her thumb along the coffee cup seam. "So I just invited something to tea?" "You invited a choice," he corrected. "Now it will wait for you." They crossed toward Tower Hill. Crowds swirled, tourists chasing beefeaters and commuters chasing time. Lucan guided her down a narrow stair that opened onto a service tunnel half hidden by railings. The air changed at once, cooler, smelling of iron and old water. "This isn't on the map," Elena murmured. "Most of the important things aren't," Lucan said. The tunnel widened into a chamber supported by brick arches. Water dripped steadily, collecting in shallow pools. On the far wall, carved faint but unmistakable, a triskelion curled, larger than any she'd seen, its blade spreading wider than her arms could reach. The lines were scarred, as though someone had tried to erase them with fire. Elena's ring burned hot. She clutched it, fighting the urge to fall to her knees. "Another anchor?" "No," Lucan said quietly. "A scar. This one failed long ago." The air vibrated. Elena heard whispers, not from water this time, but from stone, Italian, English, other tongues she didn't know, overlapping into a chorus of regret. "Too late, too late." Her breath caught. "They sound like the dead." "They are," Lucan said. "Every anchor that fails leaves its choir. They don't harm. They only remind." Elena stepped closer despite fear. She touched the scorched triskelion. The stone pulsed faintly, and for an instant she saw fields burning, walls collapsing, a flood tearing through streets that wore different names. Faces shouting, then drowned in ash and water. Then silence. She ripped her hand back, gasping. "God." Lucan's voice was gentle. "This is what Matteo offers you when he says wholeness. Forgetting this. Pretending none of it was ever true." Tears burned behind her eyes. "Who will want to carry this?" "Anyone who prefers truth over lies," he said. "And anyone who loves enough to want others to keep breathing." The whispers faded. Elena swayed. Lucan steadied her with a hand at her elbow, careful, not holding her long enough to make a claim. "Why show me this?" she asked, voice breaking. "It feels like punishment." "Because the city chose you," he said, "and you deserve to know the weight of what it means to say no." They stood in silence, drizzle whispering down through cracks overhead. the triskelion scar breathing its quiet regret. Elena pressed her palm over the ring and shut her eyes. She whispered the word she had dreamed. Sora. The air shifted. Not stone this time. Not water. Air. It swept the chamber with a force that smelled of blossoms, sharp and sweet. The whispers stilled. For a heartbeat, she thought she saw light curling like wings along the ceiling. Faint and impossible. Then it faded, leaving only the echo of silence. Lucan's face was carved with something like awe and dread entwined. It answered you. "What did I just do?" she asked, throat dry. "You asked the sky to notice," he said. "And it did." Elena's phone buzzed, dragging her back. Allison, trustees in chaos. Mateo vanished. Rumors of donor intervention. "Can you come?" She pocketed it with shaking hands. "They won't stop. Not while the panel's still here." "No," Lucan agreed. "They won't. Which is why you have to decide soon whether London keeps this ember, or whether you carry it somewhere it can still burn." "Where?" His gaze lifted east, past the arches, past the drizzle, toward horizons she couldn't yet see. "Sicily," he said, "where the first ring was forged, where the almond trees still wait." Chapter 7. The Painted Mouth. The trustees' boardroom had always unsettled Elena, even before Ash and Water began to speak to her. It was a stage built of oak and portraits, a place where money disguised itself as duty. Tonight, the room buzzed with the kind of polite panic only institutions manage. Clipped voices, paper shuffled too hard, phones vibrating under the table like contraband. Allison spotted her at once and crossed the room, sit still smudged on her sleeve. "Where the hell have you been?" she whispered, tugging Elena into a corner. Mateo was here, charming as a fox in a henhouse. He's vanished now, but left enough confusion to sell 3 stories at once. Half the trustees think he's a government liaison. The other half think he's your consultant. Elena's stomach dropped. "Mine!" "Don't glare at me. I didn't start it." Allison folded her arms, eyes sharp. "Care to explain why the reflective vest mafia keeps showing up where you are?" Elena's throat went dry. The truth, the ring, the seals, Lucan in the stairwell, would sound like madness here, among oil paintings of men who pretended their decisions had always been rational. She settled on the slimmest edge of honesty. They're after the panel. They'll dress it as provenance, as salvage, as donor requests. But if you let them take it, you won't see it again. Allison studied her. That sounded rehearsed. "It wasn't," Elena said, and hated how much he meant it. Before Allison could press, the chairman cleared his throat. "Miss Caruso." His voice had the rustle of old money. "Since you are the conservator most familiar with the artifact in question, we would appreciate your statement." Elena walked to the long table. Every step a rehearsal of defiance. Portraits of long-dead benefactors loomed above her, eyes painted to remind the living of obligation. She placed her hands flat on the table and spoke clearly. "The panel is not to be moved. Any attempt to transfer it now risks irreparable damage." A trustee adjusted her pearls. "We have assurances from donors that relocation will be safer." "Safer for whom?" Elena asked. The ring warmed. The compass in her pocket twitched like a cat that smelled prey. She let her voice harden. "The artifact is stable where it is. If you move it now, you will lose more than clay. You'll lose the story it still holds. And once that's gone, none of your insurance letters or donor smiles will bring it back." Murmurs stirred. The chairman leaned back. "Strong words, Miss Caruso. And if a government liaison arrives with stamped papers..." Elena thought Mateo's forged folder, of the van waiting by the roll-up door. She forced steel into her spine. "Then you tell them no. Because no is heavy, and sometimes it's the only thing holding the floor up." A silence followed, deeper than disagreement. Some of them looked annoyed, others moved. 1 or 2 looked frightened, which felt truer than either. Allison's mouth tightened in a smile she only let Elena see. Then the double doors opened. Mateo entered as if invited, every line of him perfect. Suit pressed, expression apologetic, clipboard cradled like scripture. "Forgive my interruption," he said smoothly. "I was summoned. The ministry has concerns about fire's safety and provenance. I have papers. Of course you do, Elena muttered. The compass jerked in her pocket, blades straining so violently she thought they might shatter glass. She pulled it free under the table, shielding it from view. The blade spun, then locked, pointing not at Matteo, but at the portrait on the far wall. A benefactor painted in 1882, hand resting on a Bible, eyes pale as fog. For a heartbeat, the paint shimmered. His painted mouth moved, almost imperceptibly. Elena's blood froze. The compass whispered without words. That one listens. That one lies. She blinked hard. The portrait was only paint again. Matteo's voice droned on, honeyed. If we act quickly, we can ensure the panel's safety, the donor's goodwill, and the museum's reputation. Surely that is preferable to confusion. The trustees nodded, lulled. Allison glanced at Elena, frowning. Elena felt the ring burn, the compass pull, the portrait's eyes like frost on her skin. She realized in a sick rush that Matteo wasn't alone tonight. The custodians had already set their hooks deeper than boardrooms and papers. They were inside the walls, painted into the city's memory. Lucan's warning echoed, not every shadow is on your side. Elena gripped the compass until its brass bit her palm. She raised her head and said, clear enough to cut Matteo's honey. Then I move that the panel be sealed. Vault B. No transfers, no salvage, no exceptions. If you try otherwise, you'll have to go through me. Matteo's smile faltered for the first time. The portrait's eyes gleamed. And somewhere deep under London, a door stirred, listening for who would win. The silence after Elena's words spread like ink through water. Trustees shifted in their chairs, uncomfortable in a way that had nothing to do with money. Matteo's smile held, but tighter now, a mask stretched too thin. Then, so faint she wondered if exhaustion had made her hallucinate, the painted benefactor on the far wall sighed. No one else seemed to notice. Allison scribbled notes with ferocious precision. The chairman tapped his pen. But Elena's ring seared hot, and the compass blades jittered in her pocket like bees in a jar. She dared a glance at the portrait. The eyes were not where the painter had left them. They were on her. Lucan's voice brushed the back of her mind, though he wasn't in the room. Careful. They will use memory itself, if you let them. Matteo cleared his throat, dragging the room's attention back. Miss Caruso is passionate, but passion is not policy. I propose an immediate vote, relocation to Palermo, escorted under ministry oversight. Murmurs rose, agreement from some, hesitation from others. Elena forced her voice into the space before consensus hardened. If you move it now, you will be complicit in theft. And worse, you won't even know what you've lost, because it will take the memory of it with it. Trustees blinked confused. Perfect. Confusion meant cracks. The portrait's mouth twitched again. Not words, not yet. A dry rasp, like stone learning speech. Elena pressed her hand against her pocket, the compass warm as a living pulse. Allison's eyes narrowed. She leaned close. What are you seeing? She whispered. Elena swallowed. Too much. The chairman raised a hand. Enough. We will adjourn for a private deliberation. Miss Caruso, thank you. Mr. Matteo, remain available. Chairs scraped, papers shuffled. Trustees filed out, some glancing at Matteo with unease, others at Elena with doubt. Allison lingered, eyes sharp, then left reluctantly. The heavy door clicked shut, leaving Elena and Matteo alone with oil paint and silence. He stepped closer, clipboard tucked under his arm like a blade. You are making this unnecessarily hard. Elena stood her ground. Good. He tilted his head, amused despite himself. Do you even understand what you're protecting? Do you know how much easier it would be to let us carry it? Yes, she said, surprising herself with the clarity of it. And that's exactly why I won't. The portrait's painted hand twitched. Just a fraction. The Bible under its palm blackened. The paint flaking to reveal something older beneath. A triskelion etched faintly into plaster. Matteo didn't react. Couldn't see it. Or pretended not to. Elena's chest tightened. It's not just him, she realized. The custodians are written into the building itself. Mateo's voice softened. You can't carry this weight forever. No one can. The portrait's mouth opened wider. This time words seeped out, a chorus layered on a single note. Give us the seed. Give us the ring. Sleep. Elena staggered back. No. The walls shivered. Dust fell from the ceiling. The compass jerked free of her pocket and clattered to the table, its blade spinning wildly, shrieking in brass. The ring burned hot enough to brand. Mateo's smile curved, satisfied. Ah, you hear them too, then. The portrait's painted eyes wept streaks of black oil down its cheeks. The mouth stretched wider, unnatural, paint cracking, a door yawning where no door should be. Lucan was suddenly there, pulling her back, his coat scattering ash across the polished floor. His voice was iron. Not this room. He flung the compass across the table. It struck the portrait's frame, and for an instant light knifed through the painted mouth. The portrait screamed, not with sound, but with silence so violent it rattled bone. Elena felt her knees buckle. Lucan hauled her upright. Mateo hissed, shielding his eyes, but whether from light or truth she couldn't tell. The compass fell to the floor, blade still trembling. The portrait sagged back into stillness. Just paint again. Just a benefactor with cold eyes. Elena's chest heaved. What was that? Lucan's voice was low, grim. A door painted into memory. They've been hiding in plain sight for longer than you think. Mateo straightened his tie, face composed but eyes sharp with fury. You'll regret this, Guardian. And you, Miss Caruso, you'll call me when the weight of no breaks your spine. He left, door slamming behind him. The room smelled of smoke and oil. The compass lay cracked but not broken, its blades twitching weakly. Elena picked it up with shaking hands. No is heavy, she whispered. Lucan looked at her, and for once, didn't correct her. Chapter 8. The Breach. Volpe had never felt like a sanctuary, but tonight it was the closest Elena had. Steel doors, reinforced walls, temperature controls humming like a heart trying not to fail. Every artifact here was supposed to sleep in peace. Mummies, manuscripts, relics too fragile to be loved in public. Now, they shared a room with a panel that breathed under cotton. Allison insisted on walking down with her, security in tow. She didn't look at Lucan, didn't seem to see him at all, but her voice was iron. You're sure about this, El? Because if I'm staking my job on keeping that thing locked, I need to know I'm not just covering for nerves. Elena met her friend's eyes. It isn't just nerves. If it leaves this building, we lose it. And more. Allison studied her for a beat, then nodded once. Fine. It stays. She turned to the guard. Double code. Round every 2 hours. No exceptions. Yes, ma'am. When they left, Elena exhaled so hard she swayed. Lucan touched her elbow lightly. Good, he murmured. You've bought hours. Maybe days. She crossed the panel, hands trembling as she drew back the cotton. The medallion gleamed faintly in the low light, its blossoms still, its crack healed too perfectly. But the air around it shifted, ash rising and falling in currents that made no sense. The ring burned. Elena bent closer. Whispers brushed her ears, not from stone or water this time, but from inside the panel itself. Words just out of reach. A voice layered, female, sounding so much like her grandmother she almost cried. Choose, Tesoro. Not for saints. For the living. Her throat tightened. I don't know how. You already do, Lucan said quietly. You said no. That's not enough. The words ripped out sharper than she meant. She gestured helplessly at the blossoms. The sealed crack, the whispering ash. They won't stop. Mateo won't stop. The city, hell, the paintings, are against me. What good is one no? Lucan's expression was unreadable, but his voice softened. It's the only word that teaches the world its limits. The panel shuddered faintly, as if the seal inside resented being discussed. The ash in the air curled into shapes, 3 blades, folding and unfolding, hungry. Elena touched the ring, desperate. Then tell me what happens if I fail. Lucan hesitated. Too long. When he spoke, the words tasted like confession. If the seal breaks, London remembers what it buried. Flood and fire both. Streets unmake themselves. Doors open that no one meant to. The custodians don't want to stop it. They want to direct it. Her stomach dropped. Direct it where? To Sicily, to the other anchors, until nothing holds. The ash thickened, curling toward her face. She staggered back, coughing. The compass in her pocket jerked violently, blades rattling as if trying to claw free. She pulled it out. It spun once, twice, then locked, pointing straight at the panel. Her blood froze. It says the seal itself is a lie. Lucan's face hardened. Or that what you're looking at isn't what it pretends to be. The panel groaned. The blossoms rippled, as though wind moved them. For a terrible instant Elena thought the clay itself was softening, opening, about to spill light or dark or both. Then the vault lights flickered. An alarm buzzed faintly, not fire this time, but pressure. Someone was tampering with the outer doors. Lucan moved instantly, shadows bending around him. They're here. Elena clutched the compass. The ring, her courage, none of it steady. Already? They never left, Lucan said grimly. They were waiting for you to open the vault for them. The panel pulsed once, hard enough to rattle its frame. Whispers spilled louder. Elena couldn't tell if they were pleading or mocking. Give us the seed. Sleep. Forget. Her phone buzzed. Allison. Security compromised. North door forced. Stay where you are. Elena stared at the glowing medallion, the trembling blossoms, the ash-forming hands in the air. She whispered the words she had dreamed, desperate. Sora. The vault went still. Not silent. Still. The ash froze midair like a sketch half-finished. The blossoms stilled. Even the hum of the climate system seemed to hush. Lucan's eyes widened. You called again. I didn't know what else to do, Elena whispered. The ring burned white-hot. The compass blades flared, pointing not at the panel now, but at the ceiling. Above them, stone groaned like thunder. The vault door shrieked under impact. Lucan drew closer, his presence wrapping her like a shield. They're breaking in. You need to decide, do we hold the panel here, or do we take it and run? Elena's heart pounded so hard she thought it would crack her ribs. She looked at the compass, at the ring, at the panel that wanted her blood. No is heavy, the ring whispered, but running carries weight too. The vault door wailed again, steel buckling where no steel should. The sound vibrated through Elena's teeth, through her bones. She backed toward the panel, every nerve screaming. Lucan stood between her and the door, coat settling around him like a decision. They'll be through in less than a minute. Elena clutched the compass. Its blades jittered so violently she feared the glass would crack. We can't fight them here. The panel, if it breaks. It won't, Lucan cut in. Not if you carry it. Her blood iced. Carry it. The blossoms on the panel shifted, clay petals curling as though the artifact itself was listening. Ash trembled in the air, forming the shape of wings unfolding. Lucan's gaze locked on hers. The ring bound it to your bloodline. That means you can lift it. To anyone else, it's stone. To you, it's alive. The vault door screeched, hinges tearing. A hand-sized gap appeared, fingers of shadow snaking through. Voices seeped in, overlapping. Give us the seed. Give us the ring. Sleep. Elena's pulse thundered. And if I can't? Lucan's jaw tightened. Then we both end here. The ring seared her sternum. The compass stabbed her palm with brass edges. Every part of her screamed no, but her hands moved anyway. She pressed her palms flat to the panel. It rose. Not heavy, not light, weightless, but not without resistance, like carrying water in cupped hands, always on the edge of spilling. The blossoms glowed faintly, ash curling tighter around her wrists. The medallion thrummed, alive. The door shrieked wider. Figures pushed through, two in reflective vests, one in a suit too perfect. Mateo's eyes gleamed in the emergency light. Yes, he breathed. At last. Lucan's body became a wall. He flung an arm, and shadows bent like spears, slamming the first intruder into steel. But more pressed in, their voices braided. Sleep. Forget. Hand it over. Elena staggered toward the rear wall, panel hovering against her chest like a shield. There's no exit. Yes, there is. Lucan barked. He hurled another shadow, forcing Mateo to duck. Compass. She fumbled it from her pocket, holding it level even as the panel strained against her grip. Show me. Her voice cracked. She forced it steady. Show me the way out. The blade spun wildly, then locked, pointing down, at the floor. Stone beneath tile groaned. The ash froze midair, then shuddered, pulling downward like water into a drain. Cracks split across the vault floor, forming a spiral coil, the moving seed. Elena's knees buckled. It wants us to go under? Lucan's voice was raw. It always does. Jump. The vault door burst. Mateo stepped through, smiling with terrible calm. You can't run from memory, Miss Caruso. It already owns you. The spiral flared. The floor dissolved into blackness. Air rushed downward, dragging loose papers, ash, fragments of clay. Lucan seized her hand. Now! Elena clutched the panel to her chest and leapt into the dark. For one impossible heartbeat, she fell through silence so thick it felt alive. The panel burned against her ribs. The compass shrieked in her palm. The ring whispered the only word it seemed to know. Choose. Then the vault, and Mateo's outstretched hand, vanished above her. They fell longer than gravity allows. Air whipped Elena's hair, stole her breath, but there was no impact, only a steady downward pull, as if the city had learned how to lengthen distance. The panel pressed against her chest, weightless yet insistent, like a heartbeat outside her body. The compass spun in her fist until she wanted to scream. Lucan's grip on her other hand was iron. At last the dark peeled back. They landed not with a crash, but with a shudder, knees buckling onto stone that felt wet yet left no mark. Elena gasped, looking up. The spiral above sealed itself, threads of light knitting shut until only blank ceiling remained. The vault was gone. Mateo's voice was gone. London itself felt far away. They stood in a cavern, vast. The walls were carved with patterns she didn't recognize, but her blood did. Spirals, blossoms, wings. Symbols repeating like music, some broken, some glowing faintly. Water pooled across the floor in long mirrors, though she could see no source. Ash drifted through the air like snow that had forgotten how to land. This, Elena's voice shook. This isn't London. It is, Lucan said quietly. His shadowed eyes searched a vast space like a man reacquainting himself with an old enemy. The part London refuses to remember. She turned dizzy. What is this place? The spiral below, he said, where anchors were first tied, where they began teaching the city to hold its hunger. The panel pulsed in her arms, blossoms trembling. Elena nearly dropped it. It knows this place. Lucan nodded. It was born here. A sound rose, low, resonant, like voices carried through stone. Elena spun. At the far side of the cavern, shadows gathered, thick as smoke. They shaped themselves into figures, tall, faceless, built of memory. Dozens. Their edges bled into the air, their steps silent. Whispers filled the cavern. Daughter of rings, give us the seed. Rest. Elena staggered back. They followed us. They never need to follow, Lucan said, stepping in front of her. His coat flared like a wall, trying to remember wings. There, the below. The nearest figure reached out. Its hand was water, its arm ash. Where its fingers touched stone, blossoms bloomed, then blackened. Elena's compass jerked in her fist, nearly tearing free. Its blade spun, then snapped toward the figures, trembling like needles held too long in magnetism. They're the lie, she whispered. All of them. Lucan's voice sharpened. Not all. Some still remember. The figures halted. From among them, one stepped forward, different. Its face was not blank, but carved faintly with lines, almost human. Its voice, layered but clearer, spoke. Not all hunger devours. Some hunger protects. Elena froze. It's defending us. Lucan's jaw clenched. No, it's choosing. The figure's eyes glowed faintly, mirroring her ring. It raised a hand, not grasping, but open, waiting. The seal does not need chains. It needs roots. Will you plant or will you burn? The panel in her arms grew hot, thrumming so violently her bones ached. Ash swirled faster, a storm coiling overhead. Elena's knees weakened. She clutched the compass, its blades rattling between choices. Her grandmother's voice brushed her ear, soft as almond blossoms. Not for saints. For the living. Lucan turned to her, eyes fierce, almost pleading. Elena, you have to answer. Do we give it roots, or do we burn it out? The cavern shook. The figures pressed closer, whispering, demanding, begging. Choose, choose, choose. Elena shut her eyes, tears hot. Her chest burned with the weight of no, the weight of yes, the weight of being the hinge. She opened her mouth. Chapter 9. Roots or ash? The word caught her throat, thick as blood. Elena gripped the panel, its heat biting her palms. The ring seared her chest. The compass shrieked in her fist. The cavern trembled, as if the city itself leaned closer, waiting to hear. She forced the air into her lungs. Roots! The sound carried, amplified, echoing along the carved spirals until it became a chord. The faceless figures recoiled, their whispers twisting into rage. Ash flared like a storm unmade. The one with eyes, the not-quite-human figure, bowed its head. From its outstretched palm, tendrils unfurled, luminous, like vines grown from light. They coiled toward the panel. Elena gasped, It's planting, Lucan said, voice taut. You chose to bind. The tendrils touched the panel's blossoms. Instead of burning, they rooted, sinking into the grooves, weaving through cracks too fine for human sight. The blossoms brightened, not with fire, but with green. For the first time, the medallion didn't feel like it was breaking. It felt like it was growing. The other figures howled. The cavern shook. Water rose in violent sheets. Ash swarmed like 1,000 wings. The hostile voices screamed. She binds us to earth. She denies the flame. Tear it free. They surged forward. Lucan stepped into their path. His shadows flared, darker than dark, cutting into forms of smoke and water. He struck like a man who had waited centuries to use violence again. For every one that fell back, 3 pressed closer. Elena, he shouted over the storm. Hold the choice. Don't let them turn it. Her arms trembled. The panel writhed in her grip, blossoms pulsing with green light that spilled into her veins. She felt roots threading through her, anchoring to her bones, binding her breath to stone. The figure with eyes drew nearer, its voice steady even in chaos. The city will still hunger, but it will remember soil before fire. That is your gift. Elena's tears streamed hot. And what does it take for me? The figure's gaze was endless. A root grows only if it stays. Her heart seized. You mean I can't? Lucan cut another figure in two with shadow that hissed like iron. Don't listen. They always twist. But the rooted figure did not waver. Stay and the seal holds. Leave and the hunger follows you. The choice weighed heavier than any no, heavier than any yes. Elena! Lucan's voice cracked with something she had never heard from him. Fear. If you bind yourself, you won't be free. You'll be part of it. The panel's blossoms burst into full light, veins of green running wild. The compass in her hand snapped, glass fracturing, blade scattering. The ring blazed so fiercely she thought her skin would scar. The figure surged again, enraged. Lucan fell back to her side, shadows ragged, his coat torn, his eyes desperate. You don't owe them eternity. You don't owe the dead. You owe yourself. Elena's pulse thundered. Her grandmother's voice whispered again. We were not saints. We chose to be stubborn. Her arms shook under the panel's living weight. Her lips formed a word before she knew it. No. The rooted tendrils shuddered. The green light faltered. The blossoms dimmed to embers. Elena drew the panel tight against her chest. I won't give myself up for it. If it wants to live, it has to live with me, not instead of me. The cavern erupted. The rooted figure staggered, its glowing eyes wide with something like grief or respect. The other faceless form screamed, their ash unraveling into storms. The panel pulsed violently, then stilled, its blossoms no longer green, but scarred with streaks of both ash and light, bound but imperfectly, alive but unfinished. The cavern's walls split with thunder. Water gushed upward instead of down. Ash scattered into nothing. The figures tore apart into silence. Elena collapsed to her knees. The panel cradled against her, chest heaving, the ring cooling slowly against her sternum. Lucan knelt beside her, his hand hovering as if he feared to touch. His voice was hoarse. You refuse them. You bound on your terms. Her laugh cracked into a sob. So what does that mean? Lucan looked at the trembling panel, at the scarred blossoms that had chosen her stubbornness. His jaw tightened. It means the city isn't done with you, he said. And neither are they. Above them, stone groaned. A seam of light opened in the cavern roof. The spiral below was spitting them back out. Elena clutched the panel, too exhausted to argue. The last thing she saw before the light consumed them was a rooted figure fading, bowing its head once, as if it, too, had said no. Chapter 10. The bells. Light dragged them upward like a tide reversing. Elena clung to the panel, breath shallow, while Lucan shielded her with his body, though there was nothing to shield from, only brilliance, raw and unpainted. Then the world slammed back. They landed hard on cold stone. Elena gasped, blinking against the shift from brilliance to half-dark. The air was damp, modern. Pipes ran overhead, humming. Emergency lights glowed along a corridor. They were in the sub-basement of the museum again, but not Vault B. Somewhere older, more forgotten. Elena staggered upright, the panel awkward in her arms. We're back. Lucan's eyes scanned the shadows. Not back. Between. The city spits us out where memory is weakest. That means we're still hidden for now. She sagged against the wall, every muscle trembling. I thought I was going to. She broke off. The word stay still burned her throat. You didn't, Lucan said. You chose yourself. Her laugh was bitter. And doomed everyone else instead? Or save them from losing you, he countered. His gaze softened. The city doesn't need saints, Elena. It needs the stubborn. The ring pulsed faintly. Agreeing, she slid down the wall, panel across her knees. Its blossoms no longer glowed. They looked scarred, bruised, as if carrying both roots and ash inside them. Not healed, not broken, waiting. The compass lay shattered in her pocket. She pulled it out. Its glass cracked, blade snapped, useless. Yet faintly, stubbornly, the brass casing still ticked. One last heartbeat. Lucan crouched beside her. They'll come again. Harder. Matteo won't let go. Elena's throat tightened. And when they do, I don't have a compass anymore. You don't need one, Lucan said. His eyes met hers. Steady. You have your no. Her chest ached. She almost believed him. Almost. A clang echoed down the corridor. Metal striking metal. Elena froze. Lucan rose in a breath. Shadows coiling. Not custodians. Too loud. Too careless. From around the corner, footsteps approached. Human this time. Security flashlights cut beams through the dark. Then a voice Elena knew. Elle? Allison. Relief hit, so sharp it hurt. Here. Elena called before she could stop herself. The beams found them. Allison appeared breathless, soot-streaked. 2 guards at her back. Her eyes went straight to the panel across Elena's knees, then to Lucan. Her gaze snagged uneasy, as though she could finally see him. What the hell happened? Allison demanded. Vault B's torn open. Half the trustees are screaming about sabotage, and Matteo's vanished into thin air. And you, she pointed at Lucan. Who are you? Lucan inclined his head, expression unreadable. A friend. Convenient, Allison muttered. She crouched by Elena, lowering her voice. Talk to me. Are you in danger? Or am I going to find out I've been guarding a lunatic with a stolen relic? Elena's chest constricted. The weight of the panel. The echo of the spiral below. Matteo's threat in the boardroom. The rooted figure's impossible eyes, all of it pressed down. She met Allison's gaze, desperate. It isn't just a relic. It's, she broke off. She couldn't say alive. Not here. Not with guards listening. Not with the walls maybe listening too. Allison's hand gripped hers, fierce. Then tell me later. Right now, we need to get you out. Upstairs is a war zone of paperwork and paranoia. They're sharpening knives, L. Some for each other. Most for you. Elena swallowed hard. And the panel? Allison's jaw set. If they take it, they'll kill us both with red tape before breakfast. But I can't exactly smuggle it past the trustees, under my coat. Lucan spoke quietly, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. Then we don't go past them. We go around. Allison shot him a glare. And what does that mean, trench coat? It means, Lucan said evenly, the city has more doors than they have keys, if Elena's willing. Both women looked at him. The panel stirred faintly, blossoms quivering as if eavesdropping. The ring pulsed. Elena closed her eyes, exhausted, stubborn, terrified. She whispered, "No more doors." The blossoms stilled. The panel went quiet again. When she opened her eyes, Lucan was studying her, not with disappointment, but with something she couldn't name, something almost like relief. Allison straightened. "Fine, we hold, but we'll need allies, L, more than shadows and broken compasses." Elena nodded, throat tight. "Then we find them." Far above, muffled by stone and distance, church bells began to ring. Not the hour, not any rhythm Elena knew. The city was answering. The bells did not stop. Not the neat peal of hours, not the scattered clang of celebration. These struck heavy, uneven, resonant enough to shake dust from pipes. Elena clutched the panel tighter. Each toll landed in her ribs like a second heartbeat. Allison glanced upward, unnerved. That isn't St. Paul's. Or Tower. Lucan's gaze sharpened. Not churches. Not anymore. The guards shifted uneasily, as if some old instinct made them want to run. One muttered, "Sounds like the blitz drills my gran used to talk about." Elena's ring burned cold instead of hot. The panel quivered in her arms. A whisper threaded the tolls, a woman's voice layered with smoke. "We warned you. You said no. Now the city says yes." Her breath caught. "They're using the bells." Lucan's expression was grim. Every anchor had a tongue. "They're striking it." The corridor shuddered. Dust sifted down. Pipes groaned. Elena swore she felt the stone itself pulse, like a lung trying to inhale. Allison snapped. "Translation for the mortals, please?" Lucan's answer was clipped. "They're waking the city." The next toll rattled the lights. One flickered, then died. Shadows swelled. The guard's flashlight shook. Elena's compass, broken in her pocket, ticked once, then again, faint and stubborn. She pulled it out. The cracked glass caught light, and the snapped blades twitched like nerves. Despite itself, it pointed up through stone and steel. Allison's eyes narrowed. Upstairs. Elena nodded. "The bells are calling something." Lucan's jaw tightened. "And if we don't get there first, it answers them." The guards exchanged a look, pale. One cleared his throat. "With respect, Ms. Caruso, if this is some security drill." The ceiling above them cracked. A fissure split plaster. A trickle of black ash fell, hissing as it hit the floor. Everyone went silent. The fissure widened. From it seeped a sound, not the bells now, but voices braided through them, whispering names. Hundreds. Thousands. Some Elena recognized. Her grandmother's, her grandfather's, neighbors long dead. Others she didn't. All demanded one word. "Yes." Elena staggered. Her throat felt seized, as if the demand were inside her lungs. She clutched the ring, gasping. "They're trying to make me agree." Lucan moved fast, pressing his palm against her back. His voice was steel. "Breathe. They can't take a yes you don't give." The fissure spat more ash. It curled into shapes, faces, hands, fragment of street she knew, her own building's doorway, her childhood piazza in Sicily, the Dockland skyline, memory itself unraveling. Allison swore under her breath. We can't hold this hall. Where? Lucan's eyes cut to Elena. You tell us. Compass or ring, choose. The compass jerked again, trembling, pointing not up now but sideways, toward a rusted maintenance hatch half hidden by pipes. Elena's stomach dropped. There! The guards looked ready to bolt. Allison just nodded, jaw set. Then move! Lucan wrenched the hatch open with a groan of metal. Beyond, another stair, spiraling upward, narrow, damp. The bells pounded louder, closer, like hammers on bone. Elena shoved the broken compass into her pocket, panel clutched tight. The ring seared against her sternum, as if reminding her of its weight. As they climbed, ash fell heavier, voices pressing harder. Yes, yes, yes. Her knees shook. She forced the word out anyway, raw and small, but hers. No. The voices faltered, for a breath. The stair went still. Lucan looked back at her, eyes fierce with pride. Good. Again. No, louder this time, cutting the tolls. The panel pulsed in her arms, blossoms trembling. The ring cooled, not gone but steady. Allison grabbed her hand, squeezing hard. We'll make it say no with you. The guards, white-faced, echoed clumsily. No. And for the first time since the bells began, the next toll rang hollow, like a hammer missing its mark. They emerged into a forgotten chamber, beneath the dome. The bells loomed above, massive, ancient bronze, swinging though no rope pulled them. Each strike sent shock waves through the air, each vibration dripping ash. Lucan raised his hand. Shadows gathered, but even he looked strained. The custodians are inside the bells. We end this, or the city remembers only hunger. Elena stepped forward, panel clutched tight, voice shaking but steady. Then we end it. The bells began to toll again. Chapter 11. The quiet that follows. The chamber shook with every toll. Bronze mouths swung overhead, each the size of a small car, their clappers moving as if gripped by invisible hands. Ash fell in ribbons with every strike, coating the floor like snow. The sound pressed against Elena's ribs until she thought her bones would crack. The panel throbbed in her arms, blossoms quivering violently. The ring seared, whispering its relentless demand. Choose. Allison shouted over the noise, voice ragged. What the hell do we do? Lucan's face was pale with strain. Shadows bled from him, bending toward the bells, but each attempt snapped like thread against bronze. They've made the bells into throats. They're speaking the city awake. If we can't silence them. Elena finished. London eats itself. The guards staggered back, hands over their ears. One dropped his flashlight, the beam spinning wild across the chamber. Elena raised the compass, though its glass was cracked. Blade snapped. Still, stubbornly, it ticked. She held it flat. Show me the lie. The broken blades twitched, then pointed, not to the bells themselves, but to the tongues inside. The clappers. Her breath caught. Not the bells. The voices are in the tongues. Lucan's eyes narrowed. Of course. The part that strikes. The part that makes sound. The bells tolled again, louder. Elena's knees buckled. She clutched the ring, gasping. How do we stop them? Lucan's jaw clenched. We break the tongues, or we bind them. Allison swore. Break a clapper that size? With what? Elena staggered forward. Panel pressed to her chest. With this. The blossoms flared, ash swirling toward them. The medallion thrummed as if eager, as if waiting centuries for this fight. Lucan grabbed her arm. Elena! If you strike with it, the panel might shatter. Her voice cracked but held. Then maybe it chooses. She stumbled toward the first bell, every toll rattling her teeth. The clapper swung like a pendulum, its surface slick with ash, its tip glowing faintly with sigils burned into bronze. As it swung close, she thrust the panel forward. Impact. The sound was not metal against clay. It was a thunder against root. A crackling boom tore through the chamber. Ash screamed upward, the sigils flaring, then tearing loose. The clapper froze mid-swing, trembling like a creature stunned. The blossoms on the panel dimmed, scorched. Elena almost dropped it. Lucan's arms caught her. One down. The other bells roared in fury, swinging harder, their tongues glowing brighter. Ash poured down like rain. Allison shielded her eyes. "El, you'll kill yourself if you try all of them." Elena gasped, voice raw. "Then help me bind instead." "How?" Lucan's gaze flicked to the ring at her chest. "It answers to you. Tell it what to hold." Her heart hammered. She lifted the ring. Fingers white-knuckled on the chain. No spinning. No hunger. Bind the sound. The ring flared white-hot. Chains of light burst from her chest, lashing upward, coiling around the second bell's tongue. The bronze shrieked, trying to swing, but the chains tightened, dragging it still. The chamber rang with silence. Sudden, shocking, louder than sound. The remaining bells thrashed, desperate. Voices poured from them, distorted. "Yes, yes, yes." Elena screamed back, voice breaking but fierce. "No." The panel pulsed in her arms. The ring burned. The compass ticked once, then shattered completely in her pocket. The third bell's tongue cracked. The fourth froze under chains of light. At last, only one remained, the largest. Its voice was not many but one, layered and terrible, filling the chamber, daughter of rings. "You are ours." The tongue swung down, glowing white-hot, aimed straight at her. Lucan moved, shadows rising like wings, but Elena shoved past him, lifting the scarred panel with both arms. Her voice shook but didn't break. "I am not yours. I am not anyone's." The tongue struck. The panel flared. Light exploded. Ash dissolved into sparks. The bell split down the middle with a sound like the world exhaling. Then silence. Every bell hung still, bronze mouths gaping but voiceless. Ash drifted to the floor and lay there, inert. Elena collapsed to her knees, panel across her lap, breath ragged. The blossoms were cracked, dim, but alive. Lucan knelt beside her, steadying her shoulders. "You silence them." Her throat ached. For how long? His eyes met hers, grave and awed, long enough to matter. Allison approached slowly, staring at the bells, then at Elena. Her voice was hushed. "Oh, you just shut up half a city." Elena looked down at the panel, at the scars etched into its blossoms. She whispered, hoarse, "No, I just reminded it who it belongs to." Silence held the chamber like a fist. Not peace, too raw for that. This was aftermath silence, the kind that aches in the bones. The bells hung motionless, bronze mouths cracked and still. Ash drifted down in lazy spirals, harmless now, like dust remembering it used to be fire. Elena knelt on the stone, the panel heavy across her lap. Its blossoms were cracked, their scars running deep, but faint light still pulsed within them, stubborn as roots. The ring had cooled to a steady warmth, as if it approved but would never admit it aloud. Allison crouched beside her, shaking her head slowly. "I don't know whether to hug you or have you committed." Elena let out a laugh that broke halfway into a sob. "Maybe both." One of the guards cleared his throat. His face was pale, his flashlight trembling. "Ma'am, I don't mean to sound ungrateful, but if anyone asks what happened here, what the hell do we say?" Allison straightened, voice crisp as glass. "We say the bells malfunctioned during the fire. Stress cracks. Nothing more. And if anyone insists otherwise, I'll have their funding cut." The guard blinked. "Yes, ma'am." Elena met Allison's eyes, throat tight. "You don't believe that." Allison's gaze softened. "No, but it'll buy you room to breathe." Lucan stood apart. Shadows curled tight around his frame, as if reluctant to let go of the fight. His eyes lingered on Elena. "They'll come harder now. You silence their throats. They'll want your voice instead." A chill slid through her spine. "My voice." "They'll try to make you their mouth," he said. "If they can't speak through bells, they'll speak through blood." The ring throbbed faintly, like agreement. Elena pulled the panel closer, as if shielding it. "And if I keep saying no?" Lucan's mouth twitched, half pride, half sorrow. "Then you'll teach them a word they were never meant to learn." The chamber groaned, old stones settling. A fissure widened in the ceiling. letting drizzle seep through. London's rain pattered on the bronze, soft, insistent. Allison rubbed her temples. So what now? Do we drag that? She nodded at the panel. Back to Vault B and pretend nothing happened? Because frankly, Elle, I don't think the trustees are going to accept the city try to eat us as a risk assessment. Elena pushed herself upright, swaying. The panel was still warm, still alive in her grip. No, if it stays here, they'll never stop coming for it. Matteo won't stop. Lucan's eyes darkened. Then you're ready. For what? She asked. To take it where it began, he said. To Sicily, to the first forge. The roots will know what to do there. Her heart clenched. Sicily, almond blossoms. Nana's voice sang semper. The word she had dreamed. Sora, Allison frowned. Sicily? Elle, you can't just hop a flight with a cursed medieval jigsaw puzzle in your carry-on. Lucan's expression was steady. There are ways, not all of them legal, all of them necessary. The guard shifted uncomfortably. Are we, supposed to hear this? Allison shot him a look that could cut glass. No, you'll forget half by morning. Elena closed her eyes, exhaustion dragging at her bones. She whispered, I don't know if I can carry it that far. Lucan stepped closer. For once, he didn't speak like a guardian or a shadow. Just a man. You don't have to carry it alone. The words hit her harder than the bells. She opened her mouth to answer, but the panel pulsed suddenly, blossoms flaring with light. The cracked compass in her pocket ticked one last time. And somewhere deep below, where ash and water once whispered, a voice stirred again. Not pleading this time. Not demanding. Waiting. Choose. By morning. The museum pretended at normal. News crews filmed scaffolds and scorch marks. Trustees gave careful statements about minor incidents. Tourists queued again outside the glass doors, hungry for stories about mummies and marble. No one mentioned ash falling from the ceiling, or bells tolling without ropes. Elena watched it all from her office window. The panel wrapped in layers of linen at her feet. The ring lay warm against her chest. She hadn't slept. Exhaustion had made her clear instead of slow. Allison barged in with 2 coffees and a glare. You look like hell. Thanks, Elena said, voice hoarse. Allison shoved a cup into her hand. Drink, then explain how I'm supposed to file last night as anything but supernatural vandalism. Elena sipped, wincing. You're not. You're supposed to let me leave. Allison froze. Leave. Lucan stepped out of the corner shadows, as if he had been part of the paint. She has to take it to Sicily. Allison nearly dropped her coffee. Oh, for what is this, a Dan Brown audition? Elle, you can't just vanish with a priceless artifact. You'll end up on Interpol's Christmas list. Elena met her gaze. If it stays here, it breaks. Or they take it. You saw what they tried with the bells. Next time, they won't fail. Allison opened her mouth, closed it, then swore under her breath. You're serious. Lucan's expression didn't waver. Every day the panel remains here, more the city unravels. The anchors are weakening in Sicily, too. She has to go. Allison pinched the bridge of her nose. And how exactly does one smuggle a medieval relic across international borders without setting off every alarm from Heathrow to Palermo? Lucan's mouth curved faintly. The city owes her favors. Doors will open. That's not an answer, Allison snapped. Elena set down her cup, hands trembling. I'm asking you not to stop me. The words landed between them heavy as lead. Allison stared at her. You're my best friend, my colleague, the only sane person in this madhouse. And now you're telling me you're going to, what? Sneak out with a cursed panel and your cryptic bodyguard. Elena's throat tightened. I don't have a choice. The ring pulsed. The panel hummed faintly through the wrappings. Allison exhaled sharply, then pressed a hand to her own forehead. God, Elle, I should call security. I should have you locked up until this fever dream burns off. But she didn't move. She just looked at her, fierce and scared. Promise me one thing. Anything, Elena whispered. Come back. The words cracked her chest open. Elena nodded, tears hot. I will. Lucan inclined his head. We leave tonight, when the city sleeps lightest, Allison muttered. And when airport security is heaviest, but she didn't stop them. She just stepped aside, shoulders set, eyes glassy. I'll cover what I can hear. Don't make me regret this. Elena squeezed her hand. You won't. By dusk, she and Lucan were moving through London's back streets, panel crated in a box that looked like any other shipment. The drizzle turned heavier, washing soot from stone. The compass in her pocket was dead, but the ring burned steady, tugging her east. They reached the docks. Cargo cranes loomed like skeletons against the sky. Lucan led her past fences, past guards who didn't glance their way, as if the shadows themselves owed him clearance. A freighter waited, lights low, hull scarred. Its name was painted in chipped white, Santa Lucia. Elena stared. That's... Lucan's eyes glinted. Not coincidence. He guided her up the gangway. The ship smelled of salt and diesel. Crew moved like ghosts, silent, eyes averted. No questions. No signatures. Elena stood at the rail as London receded, her heart tearing in two directions. The ring burned with a single word. South. Lucan joined her, silent for a long moment. Then softly, the city let you go. That means Sicily is ready to remember you. Elena closed her eyes. Almond blossoms. Nana's voice. The word she had dreamed. Sora, she whispered it into the night air. The sea carried it forward. Behind them, London's bells stayed silent. Ahead, the horizon waited. Chapter 12. Waters that Remember. The freighter groaned as it pushed into open sea. London shrank into mist, a smear of lights dissolving behind drizzle. The Thames widened, salt creeping into its breath, until the city's voice was no longer audible. Elena stood at the rail, panel locked in its crate below deck, the ring pulsing steady against her sternum. The silence of the sea should have been restful. It wasn't. Waves struck the hull with a rhythm too deliberate, as if repeating a syllable. Soare! Soare! Elena gripped the rail harder. Did you hear that? Lucan appeared beside her, coat whipping in the wind. His gaze was on the horizon, but his answer was clipped. Yes. Her throat tightened. What does it mean? That the water remembers, he said, and it knows you're coming. The crew moved with quiet efficiency, never looking at her directly. They avoided the crate, stepping around it with the kind of instinct sailors reserve for storms. One man crossed himself each time he passed it. At midnight, the sea stilled. Two stilled. Waves flattened into a mirror. The engine hummed, but sound carried strangely, muffled as though the world had been wrapped in cloth. Elena shivered. Something's wrong. Lucan's shadow lengthened unnaturally, spilling across the deck like oil. His voice was low. They're testing the water anchor. Even here, far from shore. As if to prove him right. Ripples began, circles radiating outward, though nothing had touched the surface. Within them, shapes formed. Faces of drowned sailors, mouths open, whispering the same demand she'd heard in stone and bell. Yes, yes, yes. Elena staggered back. The ring burned cold, almost icy, as if fighting the pull. The crate below deck thudded once, blossoms inside stirring. The drowned faces rose higher, necks and shoulders forming from liquid. They leaned toward the ship, dozens of them, their voices braided into tide. Daughter of rings, give us the seed. Rest. Alarms rang on deck. Crew shouted, pointing. One hurled salt into the waves, muttering prayers. The shapes only laughed, mouths spilling foam. Elena pressed a hand to her chest. They're in the water now. How do we stop this? Lucan's eyes glowed faintly, his voice sharp. You don't stop the sea. You argue with it. Her pulse pounded. And if I lose the argument, then the ship sleeps on the bottom, he said simply. The drowned voices pressed harder, a tide pulling at her bones. The crate below deck groaned again. Elena's breath caught. If the panel shattered here, in the middle of the sea. No! The word tore from her throat, raw, shaking. Not here. Not like this. The water hesitated. Just a fraction. Enough. Lucan's shadows lashed outward, striking the nearest drowned shape. It dissolved into spray, but more surged, rising higher, their mouths open wider, their chorus deafening. The ship tilted. Crew screamed. Elena clutched the rail, hair whipping in the wind, chest burning. She remembered the cavern, the bells, the rooted figure's words. The seal does not need chains. It needs roots. Her voice shook, but she shouted anyway into the Black Sea. Then root yourselves in me. The ring blazed white. Light spilled across the waves. Not fire, but roots of brilliance threading outward. They coiled around the drowned shapes, binding them, dragging them down. The sea roared, furious, but the roots held. One by one, the faces vanished. Foam stilled. The water heaved, then calmed, resuming its rhythm. The freighter steadied. Elena collapsed to her knees, gasping, the ring cooling, the blossoms inside the crate stilling. Lucan knelt beside her, his voice soft but fierce. You argued with the sea, and it listened. Her laugh broke into a sob. It nearly drowned us first. He touched her shoulder, steady. The sea always does. Far ahead, the horizon lightened. Not dawn, not yet. A glow, distant, low, the color of almond blossoms in firelight. Sicily. Elena wiped her face, heart pounding with exhaustion and stubbornness both. Then we finished this there. The ring pulsed once. The sea whispered, quieter now. Soare. Chapter 13. Shadows in Sicily. The freighter eased into Palermo's harbor under a bruised dawn. Crates clattered. Ropes sang against rusted cleats. The smell hit Elena first. Salt, diesel, citrus, and underneath it all, something she had not tasted since childhood. Almond blossoms drifting from the hills. Her throat tightened. Home, she whispered, though the word felt both true and foreign. Lucan stood beside her, gaze fixed on the skyline where domes and spires rose out of the mist. The first forge waits inland, among the trees. Allison wasn't here. The thought stabbed Elena with guilt. She imagined her friend's fury when she read the resignation email Elena had queued, short, apologetic, and signed in every way that mattered. But there was no undoing the choice. Dock workers moved with their usual efficiency, but none touched the crate that held the panel. Some glanced at it sidelong, muttering prayers under their breath. Elena swore she heard one say custode before crossing himself. Lucan guided her down the gangway. The city here will remember you more clearly. That means it will test you harder. Wonderful, Elena muttered, clutching the strap of her satchel. They left the harbor by back streets, past graffiti-smeared walls and laundry strung like flags. The hills rose green beyond, stitched with terraces. Each step felt heavier, as though the ground itself tugged at the ring. By noon they reached the orchards. Almond trees stretched in rows, pale blossoms trembling in wind. The air was thick with their perfume, sweet, sharp, almost intoxicating. Elena froze. She was a girl again, running through her grandmother's garden, petals in her hair, Nana's voice calling Semper. Her knees buckled. Lucan caught her. The roots remember, he said softly. They've been waiting. At the center of the grove, stone jutted from earth, a circle of black basalt worn smooth, ancient. Symbols carved deep into its surface matched the scars on the paneled blossoms. The air hummed, low and resonant, like the ground itself breathing. Elena's ring burned. The crate shuddered, blossoms stirring inside as though desperate to be freed. Lucan set the box down with reverence. Here, where your bloodline first forged the seal, where they first told the city no. Elena's hands shook. She knelt, pulling back the wrappings. The panel gleamed, cracked but alive. The blossoms pulsed faintly, as if recognizing the soil. She whispered, Nah, I'm here. The ring seared. The panel's blossoms flared. Light spilled outward, roots of brilliance threading into the basalt circle. The ground trembled. The almond trees swayed though the wind had died. Whispers rose. From earth, from blossoms, from memory. Not hunger this time. Not demand. Recognition. Lucan knelt beside her, voice low. The forge asks one question of you. Not whether you choose no, but whether you choose to belong. Her heart pounded. Belong to what? To this, he said simply. To the roots. To the living. To the stubbornness your family carried. Tears stung her eyes. She thought of London's silence after the bells, of the sea's faces bound by roots, of Allison's fierce grip, of Nana's whisper, not saints, stubborn. She pressed both hands to the panel. Yes, she whispered. I belong. The ground erupted in light. Roots burst from the basalt, weaving into the panel, into the blossoms, into her ring. The orchard shivered, blossoms raining down like snow. The seal burned itself into her veins, not possession, not chains. A tether, a vow. The light faded. The panel lay still, no longer cracked, its blossoms whole again. Elena sagged against it, exhausted but alive. Lucan's voice was hushed. You've done what no one else dared. You bound it and stayed yourself. Elena looked up, breath trembling. So it's finished? He met her gaze, shadows deep as eyes. No, it's begun. Beyond the orchard. Thunder rolled from a clear sky. The orchard should have been quiet after the binding. Almond petals drifted, the air heavy with perfume. The basalt circle pulsed faintly, as if satisfied. Yet Elena's skin prickled, the kind of prickle that meant eyes were watching. Lucan noticed too. His posture shifted, coat settling like armor. They followed, he murmured. Her chest tightened. Through the sea? The bells. Through memory, he said. Wherever you stand, they will try to right themselves beside you. The ring grew hot, sudden and sharp. The blossoms on the panel quivered, though it now lay whole. From the orchard's edge, shadows gathered, thin at first, then thick, spilling between trees like ink. Elena staggered upright, heart pounding. Not here, not in my family's ground. The shadows stretched into figures, tall, faceless, but wrong. These were not the drowned or the painted. Their edges shimmered, flickering like film caught in a projector. She realized with a jolt what she was seeing. Echoes of her family, her grandmother's gait, her grandfather's profile. A dozen faces she half recognized from old photographs, twisted now into hollow masks. They spoke together in a voice that made her stomach twist. You belong to us, not the living. The stubborn always break. Elena's breath caught. No, you're not them. You can't be. Lucan moved between her and the phantoms, shadows flaring from his coat. They're wearing memory like skin. Don't answer them. But the echoes pressed closer. One had her Nana's face, eyes black and empty. Why do you fight us, Tesoro? We carried this weight before you. We chose silence. You should too. Elena's knees wavered. The blossoms pulsed. Her throat burned with the urge to listen. Lucan's voice cut sharp. Elena, look at me, not them. She tore her eyes from the echoes, met his gaze. His eyes glowed faint, shadow and sorrow both. They'll tell you everything you want to hear, he said. Every excuse to stop fighting. But none of it is truth. Her hands trembled. She clutched the ring until it hurt. Then what is? His voice softened. The truth is stubborn. That's why it survives. The echoes hissed, edges bleeding. They surged as one, rushing across the orchard. The almond trees bent, blossoms stripping into the air. Elena's blood roared in her ears. She lifted the panel, pressing it to her chest. No! The word tore the air open. The panel's blossoms flared, brighter than sun, spilling light across the orchard. Roots of brilliance erupted from the basalt, weaving upward, ensnaring the echoes. They screamed, not with her family's voices anymore, but with their own, thin, desperate, inhuman. The roots dragged them down, binding them into the earth, leaving only silence and petals. Elena collapsed to her knees, shaking, sobbing, the panel hot against her chest. They looked like them. They sounded like them. Lucan crouched beside her, steadying her with a hand. They weren't your family. They were hunger pretending. Her tears burned. How do you know? Because I knew your grandparents, he said softly, and they never begged. Elena froze. You what? Lucan's gaze held hers, shadows deep. The day they forged the first ring, I stood at the edge of the orchard, guarding, watching. I swore I would keep the hunger from touching them. I failed. The words struck harder than echoes. Her chest ached. You knew them. You! His voice was raw. I watched them fall, stubborn to the end. And I swore if the seal ever woke again, I would not fail the one who carried it. Elena's breath shuddered. She whispered, You've been carrying this longer than my whole family. Lucan's eyes were fierce, almost broken. And still I would rather fail myself than watch you break. The orchard stilled. Petals drifted. The panel cooled. But thunder growled again beyond the hills. This time closer. The thunder rolled again, low and insistent. Not from the sky, but from the earth. Elena braced against the panel, heart racing. The orchard swayed as though roots were pulling loose beneath it. Almond petals scattered like ash in the sudden wind. Lucan straightened, eyes narrowing toward the hills. It isn't storm. It's steps. Elena's stomach dropped. Steps? He nodded once. Something old is walking. The ground shivered. Beyond the orchard, the hills moved, not crumbling, not sliding, but shifting, as if something beneath them was turning in its sleep. Rock split. Dust billowed. Then came the sound. Not a roar, not a voice, but vibration that made her teeth ache. The ring burned against her sternum. The panel quivered in her hands. Whispers leaked through its blossoms. The second anchor wakes. The forge is not enough. Elena staggered. There's another? Lucan's jaw clenched. Always more than one. They never trusted a single chain. The hills cracked wider. From the fissures, light seeped, not warm, not green, but pale cold, the color bone under moonlight. Shapes rose, columns first, then arches, a ruin dragging itself from the soil. An ancient temple, half buried for centuries, now clawing free. Elena's breath hitched. That wasn't here before. Lucan's shadows writhed, restless. It was, Sicily forgets easier than London, but forgetting doesn't bury forever. The temple's columns groaned as they straightened. Stone doors split, grinding open. From the darkness inside, ash poured, thicker, blacker than any she'd seen. Voices spilled with it, louder, more layered. Daughter of rings, you bound the bells. You silenced the sea. But the roots are not yours alone. Come and prove. Elena's knees shook. They're calling me inside. Lucan's hand gripped her arm. That's not invitation. That's trap. But if I don't, she broke off. The ring seared hotter, demanding. The panel pulsed violently, blossoms flaring. Her blood felt dragged toward the temple, as though the earth itself pulled her. Almond trees bent inward, branches pointing at the ruin. Petals streamed into the fissures, vanishing. The orchard that had protected her moments ago now betrayed her, urging her forward. Lucan's eyes locked on hers, fierce. You don't owe them this. We can walk away. Her throat tightened. If I walk away, what happens to Sicily? The ground answered before he could. Another fissure split, closer now, spraying dust. A farmhouse in the valley below cracked down the middle, its roof collapsing in a plume of stone. Elena's heart clenched. It spreads. Lucan's silence was answer enough. She turned back to the temple. Its arch gaped wider, spewing ash like breath. Shadows inside shifted, forming half-seen figures. Some looked like priests, some like soldiers, all waiting. Her voice was barely a whisper. Then I have to go. Lucan's grip on her arm tightened, then eased. His expression was a war between fury and faith. If you go, I go with you. Elena looked at him, shadows and sorrow bound into a man. She swallowed hard, nodding. The panel blazed once, blossoms flaring white against the orchard's dusk. The ring pulsed in time with her heart. Together, they stepped toward the ruin clawing itself from Sicily's hills. Thunder followed. Chapter 14. The temple beneath the hills. The stone arch swallowed them whole. Inside, the air was cold and dry, heavy with the smell of ash and something older, iron left too long in the earth. Elena's footsteps echoed on slabs carved with spirals that twisted until they hurt the eye. The panel pulsed in her arms, its blossoms glowing faintly as though warning her away. Lucan walked at her side, shadows curling off his coat like smoke. His voice was low. This place predates your family. Predates the forge. The Custodians shaped it before Sicily remembered its own name. Her throat tightened. And you brought me in here? He glanced at her, expression unreadable. You would have come alone if I hadn't. The path sloped down. The walls shimmered, not with paint but with memory etched directly into stone. Elena glimpsed fragments. Processions of veiled women carrying urns, men hammering seals into tablets, children with mouths sewn shut. She stumbled, while rising. These are lies, she whispered, hoping. They're what the Custodians want remembered. Lucan said grimly, lies dressed as lineage. The corridor widened into a hall. Columns rose like petrified trees, their tops lost in shadow. At the center stood a basin of black stone filled with ash. The surface shifted like liquid, forming faces that dissolved as quickly as they appeared. The voices began at once, layered, insistent. You bound bells. You rooted seas. But will you bind yourselves? Will you root your blood forever? Elena's grip on the panel tightened until her knuckles ached. They want me to what? Die here. Lucan's hand brushed her arm, grounding. They want you to surrender. There's a difference. The basin flared. Ash rose, coiling into shapes. 3 figures, taller than any human, cloaked, faces hidden. Their presence pressed against their lungs, suffocating. The central figure lifted a hand of cinders. Daughter of Rings. The seal is ours. Give it. Sleep. Elena shook her head. No. The chamber quaked. The side figures surged closer, arms stretching into blades of ash. Lucan leapt forward, shadows clashing with theirs in a hiss of fire and smoke. The central figure ignored him, its hollow gaze fixed on her. You carry roots. But roots rot. Ash endures. Give it, and the city will never hunger again. The panel in her arms writhed, tore between the pull of ash and the anchor of roots. Blossoms cracked, leaking light. Elena gasped, clutching it tighter. You're lying. You are the hunger. The figure's voice deepened, a chorus now. We are memory. We are what remains when roots fail. We do not lie, we last. Her knees buckled. She thought of the bells of the sea, of her grandmother's orchard, of every no that had nearly broken her. Her throat tore with the only weapon she had. No. The blossoms flared brighter than before. Light shot through the hall, splitting columns, searing the ash figures. Lucan's shadows surged with it, driving the attackers back. The central figure staggered, its cloak shredding. For a heartbeat, Elena saw what lay beneath. Not bone, not flesh, but hollow core, empty as a forgotten grave. It hissed, You cannot unmake what is no end. Then the basin cracked. Ash spilled across the floor, rushing toward her like a tide. Lucan grabbed her shoulder. Elena, choose. Do we burn it here or drag it back to the forge? The ring blazed white hot. The panel pulsed, blossoms screaming with light. Her blood thundered with the demand. Choose. Chapter 15. The Ash Basin. The basin cracked wider, spilling ash across the floor like a tide of insects. It crawled up the columns, across the carvings, into the air itself. Every face she had glimpsed earlier in the stone now reappeared in smoke. Her grandmother, Matteo, the drowned sailors, the painted benefactor. Hundreds of them, all whispering the same word. Yes. Elena staggered back, clutching the panel. The blossoms pulsed, split between light and shadow. Her chest burned. The ring was almost unbearable. Lucan's shadows lashed, cutting swaths through the tide, but each stroke dissolved too fast, the ash reforming. His voice was strained, ragged. Decide, Elena. Now! Her mind spun. If she burned it here, the temple might collapse. The Custodians shrieked into silence. But the forge, the basalt circle, the orchard, had felt different, rooted, alive. Could she drag this storm back there before it consumed her? The ash surged, forming hands that clawed at her ankles. Faces rose from the tide, screaming in borrowed voices. Daughter of Rings, Give us the seed. Give us your no. Give us everything. Her breath shattered. She pressed the panel to her chest and screamed, "No!" The word burst through her body, into the blossoms. Roots of light erupted from the panel, striking the ash tide. For a heartbeat, the custodians recoiled. The chamber glowed with her refusal. Then the roots faltered. The panel cracked. Fisher spider webbing across the blossoms. Elena's heart clenched. It can't hold. Lucan was at her side in an instant, shadows wrapping them both, his voice hoarse but steady. "Then don't burn it here. Bind it back home." Her tears blurred the chamber. "If I drag it out, they'll follow." "They always follow," Lucan said, eyes fierce. "But outside this place you have allies. Here, you only have me." The ash rose higher, clawing at her arms, tugging the panel. The ring blazed, branding her skin. The panel screamed in light, blossoms flaring and dimming. Elena shut her eyes. Almond blossoms. The orchard. Nana's voice whispering Semper. Her voice cracked, but she forced it out, back to the forge, back to the roots. The panel obeyed. Light exploded, ripping through the temple. The ash shrieked, voices splintering. Columns cracked. The basin shattered. Lucan's shadows flared to shield her as the floor split beneath them, opening into a spiral of brilliance. The custodian screamed her name, Elena, as the spiral swallowed her whole. The last thing she saw before the temple collapsed was a hollow figure reaching, empty hands closing on air. Then she was falling again, cradling the wounded panel, the word burning in her chest. No. Chapter 16. Return to the forge. Elena hit earth hard enough to knock the breath from her lungs. When she opened her eyes, she was back in the orchard. Almond trees bent above her, blossoms scattering like snow. The basalt circle pulsed beneath her, awake, waiting. The panel lay in her arms, cracked deep now, blossoms dim. Its pulse was faint, like a heart on the edge of silence. The ring at her chest burned with urgency. Lucan appeared beside her, shadows streaming from his shoulders like smoke shed from fire. He staggered but held his ground. "You brought it back." Elena pressed her palm to the basalt. "Now it has to heal." The ground thrummed. Roots surged in a circle, curling upward like living veins. They coiled around the panel, seeking its fissures. Blossoms flared weakly, resisting, then surrendering. The voices followed. Ash spilled into the orchard, slithering through the rows of trees. The custodians had not been destroyed in the temple. They had only been torn loose. They came as a storm, as a chorus, hundreds of faceless forms, spilling toward the forge. Lucan drew his shadows like blades. "Hold them off while it binds." Elena's throat tore with a raw laugh. "How?" "Say no," he said simply, then hurled himself into the storm. His shadows clashed with ash, slicing forms apart, though each strike cost him more. Elena saw him stagger, saw a faceless figure drive its hand into his chest, and screamed. But the panel flared, roots lashing out, striking the custodian aside. Her knees hit the ground. She pressed both hands to the panel. "Take it. Take my voice, take my no, just hold." The ring blazed. Light poured from her chest into the roots, into the panel. Blossoms screamed with brightness, sealing cracks, knitting themselves whole. The custodians wailed, ash shrieking, clawing at the trees, at the soil, at her. You could not bind hunger. You could not root ash. Elena shouted through tears. "Then I'll bind it to me." The forge answered. Roots erupted from the basalt, not only binding the panel, but lashing outward, spearing the faceless forms. Ash dissolved into sparks. Screams shredded into silence. One by one, the custodians were dragged down, buried, bound. Lucan fell to one knee, shadows ragged but alive. His eyes never left her. The storm broke. The orchard stilled. Blossoms drifted, soft as snow. Elena collapsed over the panel. Its blossoms glowed whole again, scars sealed, its pulse steady. The ring cooled, no longer burning, but heavy. She knew without being told that part of her was bound here now, rooted. Lucan limped closer, crouched beside her. His voice was rough, reverent. You've done what your family never could. You bound it and lived. Her tears fell freely. Then it's finished? His gaze was steady, dark. No, it begins now. The forge holds for today. But hunger never stops knocking. Elena looked around the orchard at the almond blossoms raining in silence. She pressed the panel close, whispering to herself, to Nana, to the roots, to the city. No. And for the first time, the word didn't feel heavy. It felt like home. Epilogue. The Weight of Silence. Palermo slept beneath a silver moon. The sea was quiet, the hills stilled, the bells of the city silent. In the orchard, the basalt circle glowed faintly, roots pulsing like veins under the soil. The panel rested at its center, whole again, blossoms sealed, no longer demanding, only waiting. Elena stood at the edge of the grove, the ring warm against her chest. She should have felt relief. Instead, her body ached with exhaustion, her heart heavy with what she had seen in the temple, in the sea, in the bells. Hunger never stops knocking. Behind her, Lucan leaned against a tree, his shadows withdrawn, his face almost human in moonlight. You gave Sicily a voice again, he said quietly. The roots will hold for a time. Elena hugged her arms around herself. And after, his gaze lingered on the panel. After it will call, and you will answer. That's what it means to belong. A silence stretched between them, full of petals and memory. Elena turned away from the forge. From the road below, she could see the faint glow of Palermo, alive, unaware. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out with shaking hands. A message from Allison. Only 3 words. Are you alive? Elena laughed softly, choked by tears. She typed back, yes, for now. Lucan's eyes caught hers. For now is enough. But even as he said it, thunder murmured faintly across the sea. Not storm, not weather, a reminder. Elena pressed the ring to her chest. She whispered the words she had carried through fire, water, ash, and roots. No, the orchard answered, blossoms falling in silence. This was The Ash and the Roots. Inheritance Begins. By Arthur Blackwood. The journey continues on the Inktail channel. This story is the first volume of a trilogy. The next volumes will be released soon. And thank you for listening.